The story began with the cry of a monster echoing from deep inside the forest. A red-haired girl named Laffy easily split the monster in half. However, Laffy was troubled by something. She had a friend named Wraith. When he saw her injured, he poured an elixir on her wound. She scolded him for using such a precious elixir on a small cut, but he didn't understand why she was upset since he could always make more. This alchemist named Wraith was her main problem. Elixir was a medicine that could heal any wound. Only a small fraction of alchemists could make it, and even then they could spend years trying with no guarantee of success. Even if they wanted to buy one, they could work their whole life and still not have enough gold. One day, Laffy wanted to buy an elixir with all her money, but the seller said they only had one, and it was reserved for a noble. She needed it for her sister, but the seller was clear that he was running a business and wouldn't sell it to her. She offered to do anything and started begging, but the seller was not interested. Disappointed, she started walking away. She bumped into a man who could barely walk, and he fainted on her. She asked if he was all right, and his stomach answered with a loud growl. This man was Wraith. When she brought him some food, he thanked her and said he was an alchemist. To show his gratitude, he offered to make her anything she wanted with alchemy. She immediately said an elixir, but then regretted it, thinking if he had something that valuable, he wouldn't have been starving. To her surprise, Wraith agreed and gave her an elixir. She was shocked and asked where he got that, to which he responded that he made it. Laffy checked the elixir if it was real, and according to the color, the magical energy coming off this small bottle that was the same as the one she saw in the shop earlier was real. Laffy offered to pay as much as he wanted in exchange for this elixir. He reminded her that this was a thanks for the bread she bought. She still wanted to do something, so he asked if she could tell him where he could sell potions. Apparently, it was his first time here in the capital. While they were walking, she asked why he wanted to sell potions, and he responded that his wallet was stolen, so he was penniless now. Laffy brought him to the Adventurers Guild, and they entered. Inside the guild, everyone seemed interested in Laffy as she was an S-ranked. Wraith asked if she was famous, and she said that it was inevitable to not be famous when you reach S-rank. They went to the receptionist Amelia, and she greeted Laffy. When Wraith introduced himself, Amelia asked if he was Laffy's boyfriend. Laffy panicked and explained that she just found him on the verge of collapsing earlier and helped him out, making him a little offended as she was denying so forcefully. As for why they were here, Wraith explained that he wanted to sell that and put an elixir on the table. Laffy was shocked once again. There were alchemists out there who spent their entire lives trying to make a single elixir, and now this person just pulled 2 elixir like it was nothing. She got more and more curious to know who this man was. Amelia checked it and confirmed that it was a real elixir. She asked if he was really fine with selling something this valuable to them, and Wraith took out 4 more elixirs, saying that he got plenty of them. Amelia's reaction was so noisy that the whole guild looked at her. Laffy grabbed his arm and dragged him to the exit. She asked what was going on here. Wraith didn't seem to understand what she was saying. He said that they were just elixirs. She asked if he made all of them, and he confirmed her. She said that his alchemy was abnormal. There were plenty of bad guys who would do terrible things to him if they knew what he could do. She told him to not sell his elixirs. Wraith said that even if she said that, he didn't have anything else he could sell right now. Laffy couldn't find any solution, so she decided that he would stay in her house tonight. It was because of her that she couldn't sell his elixirs. Wraith was still happy that he had a place to stay even if it was a girl's house. At Laffy's house, Wraith was amazed by how big her house was. Laffy came with a little girl. She introduced herself as her little sister Sylvia. Laffy wanted to make tea and Sylvia offered to do it, but she stopped her, saying that she needed to rest or her health would get worse. Sylvia silently sat right in front of Wraith while Laffy left there to make some tea. The silence made the situation even more awkward. While Wraith was worried about what he should say, Sylvia thanked him. He wondered why she thanked him, and she explained that he gave an extremely valuable elixir to her sister. He said that her sister helped him out first, so he should be thanking her. Even so, Sylvia wanted to thank him. She said that Laffy always working so hard for her sake. Wraith was a little confused, so she explained that she was doing her best to find a cure for her sickness. Wraith now understood why she seemed so desperate. He said that she had a really good sister, and Sylvia's face glowed while agreeing with him, saying that she was the best sister in the whole world. This made him laugh because Sylvia seemed so adult-like at first. She said that she was only 15. Wraith hoped that she would get better soon, and Sylvia smiled at him. Laffy was listening to them behind the door with a smile on her face. The next day, Wraith decided to make some potions now. Laffy asked the reason, and he responded that she told him to not sell elixirs, so he thought he would make some potions instead. Sylvia asked how long that usually takes. It depends on the potion, but a vial generally takes an hour to make, as Laffy thought. Wraith, however, stated that a medium-quality potion usually takes him a few seconds or so. Laffy grabbed Sylvia and told her to not let him fool her because making a potion in a few seconds was something only an abnormal dumbass like him could do. Sylvia had so many questions in her head while they were arguing. She decided to giggle and said that he was just a strange person. Wraith opened his bag and put out the ingredients. Laffy wanted to watch, which he was okay with it. They stared at him while he closed his eyes and focused on making the potion. He told the words extract, purify, set components, and sublimate, and the potion was done. Just as he said, it happened in the blink of an eye. The technique the two sisters saw during their first time witnessing alchemy was flawless. But to Wraith, alchemy was something he did every day. Having gotten so used to doing it, he had no idea what his skills were worth. The last one he made was a high-quality potion. He wanted to make a medium-quality potion. He was even holding back a bit. But if he could make lots of those, he didn't think he would have to worry about money. Sylvia said that she now understood what her sister was talking about earlier. In the next scene, Wraith and Laffy are at the Adventurers Guild, and Wraith is greeting Amelia most noisily. He apologized to her about yesterday and said that he came to sell something different today. He showed the high-quality potion he made and asked if she would buy it from him. Amelia agreed to buy it, but before that she wanted to ask him about yesterday. Laffy asked if they could leave that for another time. With that, Amelia offered 3 gold coins for 15 high-quality potions. That was a lot more than what he expected. Amelia said that since monsters have been showing up more frequently as of late, they were short on potions right now. Wraith was relieved that he could finally go to an inn. He asked Laffy what she was doing, and she said that she thought it had been a while since she last took a request. There were a lot of different types of requests, such as herb gathering and monster extermination. Other than ones that required fighting, there were also ones for finding lost cats, making potions, and so on. Hearing the details from Laffy, Wraith started to grin as she was regretting her decisions. Wraith decided to register as an adventurer. It looked interesting to him, and they even give awards. Laffy thought about it. If by some coincidence there was a request for elixirs or some other unreasonable request, he might be exposed, so she decided to keep a close eye on him and stop him. Amelia explained to Wraith that he was F-ranked now, and even without doing extermination quests, he could raise his rank to D. Laffy decided to recommend him requests other than alchemy-related ones, but Wraith's first choice was an alchemy-related request. Laffy tried to change his decision by suggesting a cat one, but he didn't seem like he would change his mind. Amelia said that she also didn't think taking this request was a good idea either, because the one who put up this request was eccentric, and no one had been able to complete it so far, so she couldn't recommend this one. However, Wraith didn't listen to either of them and wanted to take that one. Amelia asked if he heard what she said, and he said that he heard it, but it looked interesting. He went to the client's home. He recalled how Laffy was worried about him. He felt obligated to complete this request without incident to put her mind at ease. He opened the door and stated that he had come because of the request. A little girl was there and told him to follow her and he could get started right away. Wraith thought she was helping out here, but she said that she was the one who posted that request and her name was Daisy. She also mentioned that they were about the same age. Wraith apologized for mistaking her for a small kid. She told him to shut up and follow her. They entered a room and Daisy explained that he was going to help her to extract and purify those herbs. The extract was distilling a herb into a liquid containing its effects, and purify was to remove impurities from the liquid produced from the extract. She told him to do as many as he could, and before she left, she told him to do his best to not let him down with an evil smile. Wraith shuddered with the pressure of the request. He started doing it, and his work, both in speed and thoroughness, must have been over 50 times greater than that of a normal alchemist's. After doing it for a while, he wondered if this would be enough, but decided to not rest as she told him to do as many as he could. If he kept going and handily finished his first request, he could get praised by Laffy, and she would understand that he could do these requests by himself, so he continued working. After a while, Daisy noticed that it had been pretty late, so she decided to check if he was slacking off by now. She opened a door while saying that he could take a short break if he wanted. She was stunned by how full the room was. The herbs had been used up and those were made from the ingredients here. She started yelling at him, asking how he could do this much in such a short amount of time. He said that he just used alchemy like normal. Daisy was even angrier now because normally didn't explain how he did all of this so fast. She was yelling at him, ordering him to tell her how he did it. Wraith decided to show it to her, and seeing him extracting and purifying the herbs like it was nothing made Daisy tremble. As Wraith kept acting like it was normal alchemy, she eventually fainted. When she opened her eyes, she was lying on Wraith's lap, wondering why his face was so close. As she realized what position they were in, she slapped his face and yelled at him. She said that this sort of thing should be done with the person you like with a red face. Wraith apologized and explained himself by saying that he would have felt bad if he just left her passed out on the floor like that. Daisy believed him and then took a look at the room to confirm that she was not dreaming. She said that his ability was the real deal and wondered why he wasn't more famous. He said that he only came to the capital recently, and before this he was studying alchemy out in the countryside. Hearing this, Daisy had a favor for Wraith. She said that she would like him to come over and help out once in a while, and she wanted him to teach her alchemy too. Wraith was surprised. Unfortunately, he didn't have any experience in teaching, but it sounded interesting, so he accepted. Now that it was decided, Daisy showed her the request paper and he signed it. He said that he would bring this to the guild right away and left there. With that, Wraith finished his first request with a promise that he would teach her alchemy for some reason. At the guild, Amelia congratulated him on completing his request. She didn't think that he would be the one to complete it. She gave him his reward, which was 1 gold coin. Wraith turned to Laffy and said that he could complete the request on his own. Laffy glared at him and told him to repeat what he said earlier. Wraith froze. 30 minutes earlier, he entered the guild with a completed request. He said that the quests were tough. The request was to do as many as you can, so he didn't know when to stop. He just did it normally and ended up filling the whole room, and the client was so shocked when she saw it that she passed out. And so he also promised that he would teach her alchemy after that. Recalling this, he admitted that he overdid it a little. Laffy reminded him that it was not a little incident. He made the client pass out. And another thing, she told him that she was pretty sure he was being taken advantage of by that client. She got him to agree to come over regularly to help out with her ridiculous alchemy, and for him to teach her alchemy too. To the client, it must have been pretty much the perfect outcome. Wraith now realized what was about her precious smile. Laffy said that it was not a bad thing to be nice to people, but he needed to be more cautious and be more aware of his own worth. It was pretty hard to learn his own worth, as Wraith said. In the next chapter, 2 adventurers are talking about a rumor about an alchemist. She said that an alchemist with lots of elixirs showed up at the guild and asked if he thought it was real. It sounded like a big lie to him. While talking, they heard something weird. A few days after Race became an adventurer, as promised, he accepted Daisy's request. At her shop, he told her that it was hard to know your own worth. Daisy asked what was this all of a sudden, and he explained that a friend of his told him that he should be more aware of his own worth. So he had been trying to think of how to do that. But it was harder than he thought. Daisy didn't know he had friends. Wraith was shocked that she thought of him as some friendless loner. Daisy said that the most important thing was to do things in moderation. Wraith wanted to know what that was. She said that, for example, if someone were to start selling lots of elixirs at once, that would surely draw attention. So it would be better to set a standard like only selling 1 elixir per year. However, the best way would be to sell them secretly so others don't find out. Selling elixirs was a good thing. They could save lives after all, but if he stood out, it would attract all sorts of bad guys. Not like there would be any idiot who would try to sell a whole bunch of valuable elixirs at once. She asked if he made elixirs and wanted him to teach her how to make them too. He accepted and told her to show him extract, purify, set components, and sublimate. Daisy smiled confidently and told him to watch her carefully. Today was the first time Wraith was teaching her alchemy, which was a day Daisy had been looking forward to. She focused and created a high-quality potion within a pretty short time. Wraith seemed impressed. Daisy was happy and excited that he liked it, but she was completely shocked when he said that she lacked knowledge. Irritated, she asked him to repeat what he just said. He said that she knew all the fundamentals, but he was talking about the kind of knowledge she could find in the books. For example, there was an ingredient he had called Kyukura. It only grows in places where the atmospheric mana is dense enough. It was a common ingredient in elixirs and high potions, but Kyukura was not found in most books about plants or herbs, and of course she didn't know about its experience. Now it was time for her to study. Wraith put a bunch of books on the desk and made her start studying. She couldn't believe he was really making her study. She asked if studying would improve her alchemy, and he responded by asking if she knew about the lamu herb. She said that it was primarily used to stop bleeding. It was most effective when ground up and applied directly to a wound. He said that she was right. The alchemists take its clotting effect and amplify it with alchemy, producing a potion that can treat wounds. Here they have the potion that she made from lamu, and one that he made. Daisy started scanning and stated that his potion was high quality while hers was medium quality. He asked if she would be able to tell what they did differently, and she couldn't. He explained kindly that the difference was in whether they visualized the process of sublimate. The person's understanding of the herb's components and how they used it had an effect on whether they could properly visualize the process, affecting the quality of the potion. And studying was a necessary step in mastering anything. In the next scene, Sylvia greeted Wraith. She heard from her sister that he had become an adventurer. He said that he only did alchemy-related requests, so he couldn't really call himself an adventurer. Sylvia responded by saying that she had heard. Wraith hoped that Laffy didn't tell her about the fainting incident. Laffy came and asked how he had been doing. She was wearing an apron, so he couldn't really recognize her. She scolded him, saying that she was still a girl, so he apologized. She slammed the pot on the table, telling them that they should eat before the food gets cold. Wraith said that he didn't come here to eat, but she told him that he was their guest today, so he was going to eat it. Sylvia apologized to Laffy for making her do all the work, but she told him that it was fine and that she still had not fully recovered. It was her first time making this dish, but she said that it came out pretty well. They started eating, and while eating, Laffy asked how he had been. He said he started teaching Daisy alchemy. She wondered if he was going to teach Daisy alchemy like he did. Wraith said that it would probably be a few more decades until she reached that level. Sylvia asked if he learned alchemy on his own, but he got in a gloomy mood and said that he had a mentor. She seemed interested and asked what kind of person they were, and he said that he was hopeless. He said that they would throw him into a beast den when he was just a kid as training. They never did any housework and they were a spendthrift, a drunkard, a weirdo, and a completely hopeless person. He also mentioned that he did not want to see them again. After dinner, Wraith was about to go and Sylvia stopped him. She thanked him from the bottom of her heart. She said that she really saved her sister when he gave them that elixir. Wraith smiled happily and stated that he was glad he was able to help. After that, he started walking to his inn. Now that he had finished Daisy's request, he could go to the guild. He noticed that people were gathered and went there wondering what was going on. He saw Amelia and she asked for his help. Right now, at the town entrance, there were 2 injured adventurers and one of them was on the verge of death. Wraith was in a dilemma because Amelia knew that he had an elixir, and if he used his elixir here it would be dangerous. He recalled what Laffy said about how bad guys would do terrible things to him knowing what he could do. Wraith made his decision and told her to show him where they were. He couldn't look away the other way when there were lives he could save. She dragged him to the entrance of the town, and when he saw the injured woman, he realized how serious the situation was. He analyzed the woman and she had several problems like blood loss, rot, and poison. He gave a great potion to the man who was holding her. The green potion was for the blood, an elixir for the wound itself. He looked at his potions but he didn't have anything for the poison. He had to make one at that moment. While they were wondering who he was, he made the potion and gave it to her. After drinking all 3 potions, the woman was healed. The whole town was shocked and happy that a life was saved. As a result of so many people witnessing him healing that girl's wounds, Wraith received a mountain of direct requests asking for him. He should have known it wouldn't be that easy, and he admitted that this was even a bigger headache than when he was broke. He looked at the requests and most of them were asking him to make or sell elixirs to them, and a good portion of them were just collectors or rich people who weren't even sick or injured. The woman he healed came and thanked him for healing her with elixir and promised to pay him back if it took his whole life. Wraith said that he was the one who used an elixir without asking her, so he didn't need payment, but she still wanted to do something, so he asked her to help him when he was in trouble. She promised him and left the room. He was so focused at that time that he forgot, but she reminded him that he managed to help someone with his power. From now on, he was only going to sell elixirs to people who actually needed it, and just in case, he would do his best to find ways to solve people's problems without using elixirs. He went to the hospital and started treating people, but after a while he realized how exhausting it was. He was pretty much done with the requests, but he was starting to run low on ingredients, so might have to go home for the first time in a long while, or he wouldn't be able to accept requests. He went to the Adventurers Guild to say that he had finished the requests, and Amelia informed him that he had a direct request from a high-ranking noble. Wraith took a look at the request. Amelia informed him that they were from the Redium family, which he declined earlier. Wraith was thinking about turning them once again, but Amelia said that they were waiting to pick him up outside. The Redium family was one of the 4 great noble families of the kingdom, descendants of an ancient and honorable lineage going back to the founders of the country. In addition to supporting the royal family, they oversee a wide range of affairs, including managing the lands and even foreign relations. They also had connections with the Adventurers Guild. Amelia wished him good luck and he smiled at her kindly, even though he just wanted to go home and sleep. In front of their mansion, Wraith took his time examining the outside. A maid greeted him and invited him inside. They went inside and the maid knocked on a door, stating that Wraith was there. Wraith wondered if he would listen to what he said. His heart was pounding. Hearing the master's voice, Wraith felt even more nervous. When they entered his room, a good-looking young man introduced himself as Will's Redium. Wraith also introduced himself and he started chit-chatting him. Wraith wanted to go home rather than stand there and chit with him. Will's Redium straightened his back, noticing no need for pretenses. He asked if he had no intention of selling him an elixir. Wraith smiled and declined him. When he offered 300 gold coins, he declined again. When he offered to give his family support, he still declined. Wills understood that he was very clear about his position and wanted to ask him something. He wondered if he learned alchemy on his own. He said that he had a mentor. Wills asked who that was, but Wraith explained that even if he learned who it was, nothing good would come of it. The alchemist that taught him was called Lurams. Will's face changed and he asked if he was talking about the fallen hero. Wraith could not believe the rumors even reached the capital. Will smiled and said that if he was her disciple, that would explain a lot. Will thanked him for his time and said that he would prepare a carriage to take him back. Wraith refused this, as well as he had somewhere else he wanted to stop by. Will smiled kindly, and while offering his hand he stated that he was hoping to have a good relationship with him. They shook hands and Wraith left the mansion. In the city, Wraith haven't had a moment to himself lately with all the requests for him, and because of all that, he only had one elixir left. He had used a lot of his ingredients, so he wanted to go shopping today. He came across Sylvia and Laffy. Sylvia was now able to go outside thanks to Wraith. He asked what she was holding, and she said that it was a staff for amplifying magic. She was an adventurer herself too. He asked what was her adventurer rank. He was shocked to hear that she was an S rank. He asked if they were going to do a request now, and Laffy responded that they just returned from a request to take down a water dragon. In this world, monsters were assigned ranks according to their strength. The highest was S's and the lowest was F. Among them, even the lowest ranked dragon was at least an S rank. One dragon was strong enough to destroy a country by itself. Knowing that, Wraith realized that even though she was the one who called him the abnormal one, she was doing some pretty crazy stuff herself. They ended their conversation and the girls left to go to Daisy's place. While they were walking, Sylvia wondered where Wraith came from, and if he had been by himself the whole time. Laffy reminded her that he had a mentor so he wasn't alone. She asked why she wondered that. She said that Wraith was amazing, but he doesn't talk about himself at all. Laffy responded that there was lots of stuff about themselves that they hadn't told Wraith either. They wondered if he would be surprised to learn that they were not really sisters. Laffy guessed that he would be more surprised to learn how different she was back then from how she was now. Sylvia was a girl who was kidnapped by goblins. When Laffy was nursing her, she couldn't even remember anything other than her name. She was a lost girl with no relatives to speak of, so Laffy took her as a sister and began living with her. She felt like she was relying on Laffy a lot, so to prove that wrong, Laffy told her to carry their stuff to the carriage using her magic. That was easy for her normally, but then she froze and collapsed. Laffy was confused and worried as to why that was happening. Sylvia thought the elixir was supposed to cure her, but she couldn't move. Laffy held her while Sylvia was worrying about the luggage. She didn't care about the luggage and wished Wraith's help. Meanwhile, Wraith was about to reach Daisy's shop. He took a different path, but fortunately, he arrived at her shop. He was getting used to the capital. That was the first time he was going to Daisy's shop as a customer, and he couldn't even imagine she would be very pleased to see him. He imagined her face before going in. When the door opened, Daisy welcomed her customer with a shining face, but seeing him, she stopped acting. She noted that it was unusual for him to come here without a request from her, which he responded by saying that he was running low on ingredients, so he needed to replenish his supplies. Daisy noticed that he was really busy with saving people with his elixirs and whatnot. She asked why he kept coming to consult her anyway and told him to be more aware of his worth. This issue was harder than it sounded. Wraith took the ingredients he needed. Daisy said that it was 2 silver coins and smiled at him like he was a regular customer. Wraith was impressed by her customer service smile of hers. Daisy asked what he was planning to do with those ingredients, and he said that he was thinking about making some ointment. Daisy reminded him that he would be getting on the herbalist's bad side if he did that, and if some alchemists started making more effective medicines than them, they would be out of a job. Wraith was okay with that. He did hear that his mentor was also hated by the herbalists. Daisy realized that he didn't care about it, so she mentioned that the adventurer he saved was apparently attacked in a pretty unusual place. Wraith didn't know that, even though he was the one who saved them. Apparently it happened in a place where monsters have never been reported before, and there was also an unoccupied house nearby. The wound he treated had both poison and rot in it. There were several poisonous monsters, but not many monsters could inflict rot. The wound could have been from an undead-type monster, or it could have been from a special weapon. Those were the 2 possibilities. The exact conditions for a monster to appear were unknown, but it was said that they appeared in places where mana was dense. Regardless, strange things happen from time to time. Wraith bought the ingredients and left the shop. When he opened the door, a hand reached for him and started dragging him. It was Laffy. She apologized while dragging him and stated that she would explain it later. She took him to her house and Wraith took a look at Sylvia, who got sick again. Laffy was feeling so guilty that as an S-ranked adventurer, she couldn't save one person. While she was about to beg him to save her, Wraith interrupted her and told her that she was going to be fine. He smiled and stated that he was going to save her. Laffy gasped and bowed to him, thanking him. Wraith explained to her that Saliva was not able to move because of a condition known as magic crystal disease. Magic crystal disease was a condition where magical energy slowly crystallized inside the body, making the inflicted unable to move. The elixir he gave her must have only slowed down its progress instead of curing it. This was the first time he had seen this disease, but he could make a potion to cure this disease. The only problem was that he didn't have the ingredients to make it. Laffy volunteered to gather the ingredients, but he said that she was not familiar with the herbs. He suggested she come with him to his house. There were monsters there, but it also had the ingredients he needed for the potion. Laffy gladly accepted to help him. The crystallization seemed to only be in her hands and feet. The time it would take to reach her heart was about 7 days. He told Laffy that Sylvia had about 7 days before the condition became critical, so they still had some time. They were going to leave tomorrow morning. Until then, he had things he needed to prepare, so he headed home now. Before he left, Laffy stopped him and thanked him for his help. Wraith grinned. At home, Wraith was busy in her laboratory. He added the poison antidote to the ointment and mixed the monster warding potion with the curing potion. Lastly, he took out his ring and put it on the table. The next morning, Laffy was ready with the carriage. They got on the carriage and headed to gather the herbs that Saliva needed. On the road, Wraith asked if there was anyone taking care of Sylvia. She said that Amelia was looking after her. Wraith knew she was probably doing it for Laffy. Laffy must have lowered her head and begged her to do it. He can't even think of anyone better to look after Sylvia right now. That being said, he said that there was something he had been wondering after examining Sylvia. He said that magic crystal disease originally came from the Northeast, and it was not a disease she would contract in the capital. He asked if Sylvia ever visited the Northeast. Laffy said that she had not since she met her. With that, Laffy didn't see any point in hiding and confessed that they were not biological sisters. She saved her after she lost her memories, and since she didn't have any relatives, she took her in. Wraith listened to her carefully. She said those words so easily, but to make such a decision when she was even younger than she was now was not something that could be taken lightly. Knowing that she lost her memories, it was possible that she originally came from the Northeast. Laffy promised to keep that in mind and then asked where his house was. Wraith was living in a small wooden house that was farther down the road they were in. Living in a forest was unusual, but that small house was where his mentor brought him to live until she mysteriously disappeared one day. He was still questioning where his mentor was. They suddenly found someone injured in the forest. Wraith treated the man and he asked if they were heading into the forest. When they confirmed him, he told them not. He said that he was attacked by a monster in there and he barely escaped with his life. Laffy asked what kind of monster it was, and it was a blood wolf. They thanked him and informed him that they had their reasons, so they needed to keep going. After a while, they arrived at the forest he was living in. They started walking. If there were not monsters, they could have continued by carriage, but considering the risk, it was better to proceed as inconspicuously as possible. There might be monsters, so Wraith warned Laffy. Laffy was fully focused on her job. As she was an S rank, she was ready for a battle at any moment, and her eyes were everywhere. They were already halfway to his house, but they hadn't seen a single monster so far. He wouldn't be surprised if they ran into one right about now. Suddenly, something cold dropped on his head, and Laffy could warn him 1 second before the explosion happened. Wraith could barely escape from that attack. That was a C-rank blood wolf. And it was not just one, they were surrounded by them. Wraith was surprisingly collected. He said that he was used to those sorts of situations and he was actually terrified on the inside. So much so that he would love to just make a beeline out of here right now. Hearing that he wanted to run for it, Laffy started attacking the wolves. Her plan was for Wraith to run away from there and hide while she held them there. She said that even for someone like her, she can't fight this many of them while protecting him. Wraith was concerned about her, but she reminded him who he was talking to by slicing up the wolves one by one. Wraith started running away. While Laffy was out there wiping out the blood wolves, he was bummed that all he could do was find a place to hide until it was over. He felt pathetic. Suddenly, he heard some rustles and it was more blood wolves. He started running away from them too, but they were a lot and they were so fast. He took out a potion that repels monsters, one that was particularly effective against animal-type monsters. He threw the potion to the wolves. He was so confident that they would stop and run away, but they sniffed the potion and then stared at him for a second before they started chasing him again. As he was running away from them at full speed, he was questioning why they were chasing him. The only answer was that their sense of smell was numb. Considering that this was the problem, he took out the potion again and splashed it on their eyes. That was a homebrewed dye of his and it should impair their vision for a while. Then he threw something that made them stop hearing. If they couldn't smell, he only needed to deal with their sight and hearing to throw them off. That was exhausting, but there was no time to lose as he needed to find Laffy. Suddenly he heard a crashing sound from the tree that he was leaning on. Meanwhile, Laffy was done with the blood wolves and she was looking for Wraith. She heard the sound of something and got a bad feeling about that. She started running towards where the sound came from. Wraith was questioning his luck while also running away from a burning skeleton. He brainstormed what to do. Skeletons didn't have any of the 5 senses. Thus, monster-repelling potions or vision-impairing dye wouldn't work on it. The skeleton chasing him over 2 meters tall and wielding a large sword that could fall a tree in one strike was an impressive specimen indeed. But even such a creature had a weakness, which was holy water. He had 3 vials with him right now, and realistically, even if he used all 3, it would barely be enough to hold it back for a while. So he tried to think of a different way. He had an idea and he threw something on the skeleton. The thing he threw seemed to be working. He continued to throw potions at it and then used his compress and agitate power. What he used was kuchna, which forms a highly adhesive fluid when mixed with water. Laffy was looking for Wraith when she saw smoke rising. A few minutes ago, Wraith somehow managed to immobilize it for a while, but he wouldn't be able to take it on if it came after him again. He needs to get away from there and find Laffy immediately. He had put some distance between them, and he couldn't hear the skeleton anymore, so it was a good place to use his smoke signal method. He put some kora fruit, normally used to make dye, into a pot and compressed it with alchemy to force it to explode. This converts the kora fruit into a gaseous form. However, this was considered a failed alchemy process and not normally done on purpose. He knew about this, but it was his first time actually doing it. Now he just needed to hide and wait for Laffy to come. He decided to climb a tree and pass the time that way, but there was no need for that. The massive sword of the skeleton came at him and shattered his resistance ring, which was his last line of defense. It sucks that he lost his ring to a surprise attack like that, and he was sure he could buy more time if only he used it more effectively. He didn't have anything up his sleeve anymore, and his stamina was running out too. It looked like this was how he was going to die. The skeleton reached him, but just a second before it reached, Laffy came and used her crush power to crush the monster. She asked if he was okay, and Wraith blushed a little. Seeing his comfortable face made her laugh that he had no sense of danger. Wraith asked if she dropped her sword, and she said that when she threw it at the skeleton's arm earlier. However, when they looked at the skeleton, it started to regenerate, which was a trouble for Laffy. She told him to step back and deal with the skeleton by herself. Wraith thought she won, but she just couldn't destroy it. The skeleton was using magic, so she decided to destroy that magic of its by force. With fracture skills, she attacked it, and Wraith found himself in her arms like he was a princess. Wraith was sure he couldn't get married now that he was in the arms of a girl. Laffy said that running was their only option as long as they couldn't beat that skeleton, and she asked if he knew the way to his house from there. Wraith realized what their priorities must be, and it was definitely the ingredients he needed. He guided Laffy while the skeleton was chasing them. The skeleton suddenly stopped and started growling. He wondered what he was doing, and then noticed that the blood wolves were gathering. He informed Laffy that it was calling more blood wolves. Laffy planned to fight them off as they ran while also not dropping him. A blood wolf attacked her, but she did manage to slice it off while holding him. Wraith was once again impressed. Suddenly, Laffy had a feeling. Wraith asked, and she said that those blood wolves were not alive. She guessed that they were dead bodies being controlled by that skeleton. She told him to look at their shadows, and Wraith also noticed that they were controlled by magic. Magic that could control dead bodies, also known as necromancy. This explained that they didn't have a sense of smell. This was his first time seeing a skeleton that could use magic. Among monsters, there were a few who were able to use magic, such as dragons with their breath. Even so, the ability to puppeteer corpses was a level of magic that normally only proper mages could cast. If they were assigned this skeleton a rank, it would be pretty high. He asked what they were going to do, and she said that they just had to fight it. She wanted him to grab what he needed while she held them off. They were near his house, and after running for a while, they arrived. Laffy dropped him, and he entered the house while she was fighting off with the wolves. The dust in the house was terrible, as this place had been deserted for so long, but he was just glad that it hadn't been destroyed. His materials were in the basement. When he went down there, all his stuff was fine. He wished to carry more of it with him, but for now, he only got what he needed. Those materials he risked his life and limb to gather would definitely come back for him someday. He noticed a sword, which was from that time his mentor sent him to gather ingredients. He recalled the time he was battered, complaining that he was going to die back there and scolding his mentor that she was going to kill him. She greeted him like he wasn't in total dust and told him to make sure to store those ingredients properly. He couldn't believe she was saying those when his disciple just returned all beaten and bruised, and also he didn't hear anything about there being undead too. Because I didn't mention it, she said while acting cute. Wraith was sure she would get him killed one day. She started laughing and said that she didn't know there were undead there either. Undead were easy to deal with anyway, just slapping holy water on them would be enough. But Wraith reminded her that he couldn't use magic like her. If he tried, he would be minced meat before he even had a chance to splash it. She responded that he would be closer to a fillet than minced meat, which wouldn't matter when he was dead. In that case, she brought a sword saying that she had a gift for him. She made it a long time ago and never found a use for it, but it was really good against undead. But Wraith didn't know how to use a sword. Back to the present, he took the sword, thinking that his bad mentor could be helpful sometimes. He was going to bring that sword to Laffy, but the moment he stepped outside his home, the home was destroyed. Laffy came in panic asking if he was alright. Wraith started yelling at her, saying that he would never forgive her because of all the ingredients that he spent his blood, sweat, and tears. He gave her the sword and said that she could defeat it with that. He didn't sound so confident of that, so he explained that he wasn't the one who made it. The sword was light, but when she used it on the skeleton, it did not regenerate. That sword worked on him. After her attack, the skeleton literally ran away, but Laffy didn't seem like she would let it off that easily. She jumped on it before it disappeared completely and killed it. Wraith was impressed, but she said that she was not an S rank for nothing. But to be fair, she only won this time thanks to that sword. From the skeleton's body, a big magic gem appeared. Magic gems were crystallized forms of magical energy. They are used as a material in creating magical devices. They tend to be found in the bodies of strong monsters, and they emit magical energy and serve as a source of power for those monsters. It was Wraith's first time seeing one. He knew they existed, and he had always wanted to use one in his alchemy someday, but since they weren't things that could be bought and sold easily, he hadn't had a chance to get his hands on one until now. To think that they were able to get both a magic gem accomplished and their objective of getting the ingredients he needed was excellent. But one thing was upsetting him, and it was the fact that he lost all the precious materials buried inside the remains of his house. It was tragic, but there was nothing he could do about it now. They had defeated the skeleton and got the ingredients they came for, and now it was time to hurry back home. It had been 2 days since the morning after Sylvia collapsed, and Laffy and Wraith returned to the capital. Only 5 days left to treat Sylvia. When they arrived at home, Laffy rushed to see her sister. Amelia and Sylvia were sleeping. Wraith went to make the potion while she was taking care of her sister. Now it was time to get started. Sylvia's magic crystal disease was a result of the magical energy in her body crystallizing, so he was going to make a potion to absorb that magical energy, using the ingredients from a monster. The monster he was using was called a Veto. It was an SS rank monster that inhabited the north, and its most defining feature was its ability to consume the magical energy of others. A monster that absorbs the magical energy of those who come in contact with it. There had been incidents where those working with the Veto lost control of it, were absorbed and died. Magic isolating gloves were needed to handle it without losing consciousness, and of course his mentor would defeat those terrifying creatures to use them in her experiments. Wraith simply got her leftovers. He loosened up the dehydrated Veto, added water, and heated it. He used to purify and sublimate. If that was a normal potion, he would use set components now, but that step was not needed for medicinal potions. The most important step was sublimating. It was normally a step to amplify the effectiveness of the ingredients, but not in this case. Here, he wanted to suppress the magic-absorbing properties of the Veto. This was a feat that only experienced alchemists were able to do on purpose. He focused and believed in himself. Laffy was watching the room glowing. She took a look at him and was amazed by his skills. She trusted him on Sylvia's treatment. She was truly believing him. After tense moments, all he had to do was to get Sylvia to drink that. But she was sleeping, and she didn't want to forcibly wake her, so he decided to wait until morning and take a short rest on the table. He woke up in the morning and brought the potion to Laffy. When he saw Laffy, he asked where was Amelia. She responded that she had just gone home since she was there to take care of Sylvia. He said that he finished making the potion. Laffy was so happy that she teared up a little. They knocked on Sylvia's door and entered the room. Sylvia's wounds were all over her body. Laffy and Wraith immediately went to her, and when he checked, Wraith noticed that the disease was progressing faster than he thought. He gave the potion to her and told her to drink it. She drank the potion, but the wounds were not disappearing. Laffy got panicked asking what was going on, but Wraith said that this was a slow-acting potion and she shouldn't panic if nothing happened today. And no matter what, he warned Sylvia to not use her magic until he said she could. Wraith used his scanning skill and saw that the slow of her magic was stabilizing, which meant the potion was working. He said that for now, her life was not in danger anymore. With a big smile on his face, he told them to relax and take it easy today and get a lot of rest. Laffy couldn't stand still after hearing his words. They worried about her, but it was just that she couldn't stand as all the strength left her body when she relaxed. They started celebrating together when Wraith left the room. He was good for today since he borrowed Laffy's place, but he needed a place where he could manage his ingredients and potions. The inn he was in now was pretty limited. There might be patients he wouldn't be able to treat because he didn't have enough working space. He wanted a spacious place, somewhere he wouldn't be a bother to anyone. He went to Daisy's shop, but he was spacing out, so she asked what was going on. He said that it was peaceful there. He just risked his life the other day at getting some materials from the forest, and they were chased by a giant skeleton and a whole bunch of blood wolves. Daisy asked if that skeleton could have been the monster that attacked the adventurer he saved. Wraith was surprised. Word in the guild is that those two saw a giant skeleton, but for that to happen in the forest where there weren't supposed to be any monsters was a little weird. She asked what happened to the skeleton, and he said that they defeated it. He said that the adventurer he was with pretty much did all the work. Daisy asked who that was because that skeleton was at least an A+ rank. He said that he was with the adventurer named Laffy. She recalled that Laffy was the name of the S-ranked adventurer who was the youngest. She was impressed that he knew someone that famous as he hadn't been here in the capital for half a year. The next day arrived and Sylvia was better. Her magic circulation was pretty healthy too, and she made a complete recovery. Sylvia was so happy that she hugged Wraith thanking him. Wraith stated how glad he was that everything turned out fine. He then mentioned that they were talking about that skeleton that they fought in the guild. She said that she received a request to get rid of a monster this morning and the location was the forest near the capital, the same one they went to the other day. Wraith was surprised that they asked specifically for her. She also mentioned that the client was the head of the Redium family, one of the 4 great noble families. Wraith knew that guy. Sylvia said that she already defeated that skeleton. Laffy responded that there were probably still blood wolves around, but she decided to report the skeleton thing to the guild first. Wraith decided to come along too, as she would need the magic gem to prove they had defeated it, and Sylvia wanted to join them too. 3 of them started walking to the guild. Wraith noticed that there were a lot of different shops in this city. Sylvia promised to introduce him to the place where they bought weapons next time. They stopped at a jewelry shop and Sylvia liked a necklace for Laffy. Wraith was looking at the accessories that might make a good replacement for the ring he broke. Sylvia asked if there was something he wanted to buy, as she wanted to buy him a present for treating her. It was really hard to say no to a huge smile like hers, so he showed her the ring. Based on her reaction, Wraith wanted to choose something else, but she said that she would buy it. A necklace as a present means, "I hope you will stay safe," meanwhile. A ring as a present means something else that makes her blush. After buying the gifts, they arrived at the guild and Amelia seemed so happy to see her healthy. Sylvia thanked her for looking after her. Wraith felt good seeing them being so close to each other. Amelia asked if Laffy was here because of the request, and she said that it was about the monster the request was asking about. She explained that when they went to that forest to get the ingredients to treat Sylvia, they defeated it. That was amazing to Amelia. Wraith took out the magic gem they got from the skeleton. For a magic gem this size, the monster would have been a tough opponent for anyone other than an S-ranked adventurer. She knew that Laffy was really strong, but she still reminded her to not overdo things. She checked the magic gem and it was real. She was going to make the report to the Redium family and then they would get the reward in 3 days. Laffy stated that she wanted to give all of the rewards to Wraith. He tried to stop her, but she said that she did everything for Sylvia, not for the award, and so as a token of appreciation to Wraith, it was only right to let him have the reward for the skeleton. Wraith gave up on her after hearing her, but the reward was 200 gold coins. He didn't even know what to do with that many coins, but Sylvia suggested opening a shop. Managing a shop with no experience would be rough, but he had talked about it with Daisy before. He made his decision and decided to make a workshop. A workshop was a place that held great meaning to any alchemist, a place where they could freely experiment without bothering others, and Wraith was no exception. While living in the forest, most of his experiments were isolated in the underground workshop. But even since coming to the capital, he had been too occupied with life and finances to think about it. But now he had money to spare and he could make one. He went to Daisy's shop and told her about his plan too. Daisy wondered why he wanted that all of a sudden. He said that he had money to spare and he could use it to make his workshop. She was still figuring out why he would come to her. He explained that he didn't know any skilled craftspeople or anything, so he thought he would come and ask the all-knowing Daisy for help. Daisy seemed charmed. Wraith's master made her workshop all on her own, but she was an exception among exceptions. Daisy stated that she knew many people who could help him, but she wanted to come along too. Wraith didn't expect her to be in his workshop. Daisy asked in a furious tone if he was opposed to having her around, but it was just that he already had someone else in his mind that he wanted to help him with making the workshop. Daisy's face got darker, and she said that this was for his sake too. Wraith could not say anything further, but he was still worried, because she seemed like an antisocial person. Wraith was surprised that she started pushing him to walk as the shop would be unsupervised, but she explained that she was going to close up the shop in the afternoon anyway. They started walking and she asked about the person on his mind. He asked if she knew Sylvia, Laffy's younger sister. Daisy did know her, but she asked if he was an idiot as he was thinking about asking an S-rank adventurer to help himself. Wraith explained that he wasn't the one who suggested that. After that, he asked what was the person who knew how to make a workshop like, and she simply responded that they were a total weirdo. Wraith didn't scared as he already knew a weird person, which was Daisy. They arrived at a normal-looking house and knocked. When the door opened, a happy woman screamed because of her happiness to see Daisy. She hugged her tightly while she was yelling for her to let her go. Wraith did not expect her to be this strange. Daisy pushed her, saying that it was enough. The woman started tearing up, explaining that this was how she expressed her eternal love for her. But she responded cruelly that she did not need it. Then the woman noticed Wraith. He introduced himself and she seemed to hear about him. Her name was Nicola. Nicola asked why they came to her. He said that he wanted to make a workshop and Daisy brought him to her. Nicola seemed happy that Daisy preferred her. About his request to make a workshop, she asked if it would be his first workshop while taking out some paper. Wraith responded that he had one before and he had an idea of what was needed. This time he wanted to make one in the 2-story building he was living in. He already had a prototype for the workshop, so he would like to base it on that his budget was 200 gold coins. But he could add a little more if it was not enough. Nicola said that with a budget like that, There were many that they could do, and asked what he was planning to use the workshop for. He was planning to use it mainly for making potions and magical devices. He then remembered to show her the magic gem, asking if it would be useful as part of the workshop. Nicola seemed impressed. She asked him to show her where he wanted his workshop to be, and they would discuss the price after she had seen the place. They waited for her while she got some things ready. While waiting, Wraith asked how she knew Nicola, and she said that she met her when she was an adventurer, and hadn't been able to get rid of her since. He was shocked to know that she was an adventurer. Nicola came and they started walking. He showed them the place that would serve as his live-in workshop. The place was quite big. They entered inside and Nicola started examining the place. She decided to make her quote now, and about that magic gem, she asked if he would like to use it to store magical energy. Wraith was surprised because magic gems were mainly used as materials for magical devices, or as devices themselves, and she was suggesting none of them. Nicola explained that he already had a lot of magical devices in his workshop, and it must be a lot of work for him to supply them with magical energy every time. So using the magic gem to store magical energy so that he could use his tools right when he needed would be better. Magical devices require a large amount of magical energy to work. Having a reserve of magical energy would make it a lot easier to work with devices that continuously consume magical energy, so he was in. Nicola then informed him that they would start setting up his workshop in a week or so. She then changed her whole mood, questioning him about what kind of relationship he had with Daisy. Wraith shuddered and wanted to escape from the feeling of terror he was in right now, but Nicola grabbed his neck. Before he could say something, Daisy explained that they had a very good relationship, skipping that it was a teacher-student relationship, and then added that he had been teaching her all sorts of things. Wraith stated that it was a little bit weird way to explain their relationship while trembling in fear. Nicola called Wraith, and with a white face she threatened him about what would happen if he ever laid his hands on Daisy. Wraith swore that he would never do anything to her. Hearing this, Nicola's whole mood brightened and she smiled like nothing happened. She kissed and hugged Daisy and told her that she would be going home now. While Daisy was trying to push Nicola as she was touching and kissing her, Wraith didn't know where to look. When she finally left, Wraith asked if she really wanted to come next week too, but Daisy was still dedicated. She said that there was nothing she could do about how touchy she was. Before she left, she thanked me for today. In the next scene, Wraith and Laffy are walking as she asks what he came to buy today. He said that he was going to buy anything that looked good, such as stuff for his workshop's interior. She asked how it was going with the workshop, and Wraith could only respond that it would work out. Wraith then took out a flower clip and tried it on Laffy. She got embarrassed and said that there was no way that she would look good with something girly like that. A shop owner saw them and asked if they were on a shopping date and offered to give them a discount. However, they were so quick to say that they weren't dating. Wraith started to buy whatever he wanted while Laffy was waiting for him to finish. The next stop was some ingredients for dinner, so he asked if there was anything Sylvia and her liked. She didn't have any preferences, but Sylvia likes sweet things. When Wraith said girls in her age love that sort of thing, she noticed how old he sounded. Wraith felt like Daisy said something similar to him before and got depressed for a moment. They decided to make some dessert as well and went home. In the kitchen of Laffy's home, they started chopping off the dragon meat. Wraith wanted to help, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't cut it. Laffy told him to cut the vegetables while she cut the meat because the dragon meat was pretty tough. Although the hardships, they managed to prepare a good meal. Sylvia seemed to like how the food looked. She already loved Laffy's cooking and she was looking forward to tasting Wraith's dessert. They started eating dinner while chit-chatting, and then Laffy and Wraith went to the kitchen to clean the dishes. She asked what exactly was a workshop, so he explained that it had stuff like magical devices and shelves to store ingredients. She thought it would have some strange things in it, considering that it was his workshop. After cleaning the dishes, Wraith thanked them for the meal and left for his home. 1 week later, Nicola, Daisy, and Wraith met, and Wraith said that he brought one other person to help out. He showed them Sylvia. She introduced herself with a shy face that Nicola was about to faint because of her cuteness. She wanted to hug her, but it was her first time, so she held herself back. Looking at Sylvia, Daisy compared herself to her and felt a little jealous. Sylvia said that he just offered to help out on him, so she wasn't sure what she would do. Nicola laughed and said that she didn't have to lift a finger as he would work hard enough to make up for her and Daisy both. Daisy approached Sylvia and wished to work together well with her. Sylvia was melting out of her cuteness. She whispered to Wraith, asking who she was as she was so cute. Wraith said that her name was Daisy and she was actually older than her. Hearing this, Sylvia panicked and used honorifics. Now that they were all here, Wraith asked Nicola if the preparations were done. She said that she had everything they needed in this magic bag she was holding. The magic bag used spatial magic to fit more things inside than its outer dimensions would suggest. It was a very useful item. However, it requires a high level of magic to make, and it was not readily available on the market, making it a rare item. Nicola explained that she had a mage friend of hers helping her with that, and they somehow managed to make one by working together. Making something together with someone was something that Wraith had never done before, so he was surprised. But he knew a mage who might offer their help, and they might be able to make some amazing things by working together. Now, it was time to work. Aside, it seemed like Sylvia might not be very good with Nicola as she couldn't focus on anything. When they entered the workshop, Nicola took out the furniture from her bag and used her spatial magic to put them in their places. Wraith was amazed by her magic. Sylvia asked if he was really that amazed. Something like that was nothing out of the ordinary for mages, he guessed. Sylvia said that spatial magic was fairly difficult to learn, and at the very least it was on the same level as the kind of magic she used. Hearing that, Wraith asked if she wanted to make a magic bag together with him. Sylvia thought this was a good idea and agreed to do it. While smiling nicely on the outside, Wraith was glad that he could finally have his magic bag. Now it was time to start with the stuff for the potions. Nicole set up a magical device for storing the ingredients. Ingredients like herbs require very precise temperatures and humidities when they are stored, and this is an unskippable step when making any kind of workshop. They split the work and started working all together. After finishing his first task, Wraith moved to his second task but then noticed Daisy and Sylvia talking. Sylvia was talking about something, but then Daisy warned her that it was not the time for chit-chat, and they needed to put their magical energy into the skeleton's magic gem. Nicola was setting up the magical device all by herself, and Sylvia the mage was already handling the charging of the magic gem while he had run out of things to do. As he felt a little useless around them, he decided to think about how to set up the rest of the workshop. On the second day of the workshop, they were going to make the magical devices. When Nicola asked if anyone had any ideas, Wraith was willing to say something. He said that he had something he wanted to try. He showed them the magic circle he drew. Nicola seemed interested while Daisy and Sylvia were confused. Sylvia had never seen one like that before. Wraith explained that this was a magic circle, but it was not for using magic. Daisy asked what it was in an impatient tone. He explained that this was a magic circle for creating magical devices. Using the alchemical process of append, he could imbue the magic circle with the magical effect he wanted, and use it to turn accessories and things into magical devices. He was thinking of using the magical energy from the magic gem to supply this magic circle with the energy it needed, and it might also be able to help shorten the time needed to make magic circles. Originally, magic circles could only be used once before being discarded. If used to create a magical device, it would lose its effect in the process and become useless. If one wanted to create another magical device, one would have to draw up a new magic circle from scratch. But if it was possible to continuously supply it with energy from a magic gem, the case might be different. Since the magic circle would be continuously supplied with magical energy, it should be possible to make it permanent and reusable. It would of course consume a large amount of magical energy in the process, but right now, they had a skeleton's magic gem holding the magical energy of an S-ranked mage. Nicola said that his idea might work and asked him to give her some time since she hadn't seen his magic circle before. Meanwhile, Daisy and Sylvia were puzzled. Wraith and Nicola finished their conversation and Wraith apologized for leaving them out. He then asked Sylvia once again if she would like to make that magic bag they were talking about the other day. He wanted her to apply some magic to a bag, but it wasn't just normal magic. He heard from Nicola about how to create a magic bag, and the problem was whether or not he would fail. He gathered the ingredients, which were veto fluid, a bag, and a brush. The fluid in the bottle had already absorbed some of his magical energy, and he used the fluid to draw a specialized magic circle on the surface of the bag. That was the first time he was doing it, so it was hard for him. Daisy and Sylvia waited patiently while he was drawing. After that, it was Sylvia's turn to apply spatial expansion magic to the magic circle. She told them to stand back and started the process. When she was done, they couldn't tell if it worked, so he tried out. He opened the bag and the inside of it was pretty big. She thought this was a success, but Wraith felt something strange. Something liquid came out of the bag and suddenly it turned into a round sphere and started to grow. Daisy barely held on to Wraith's foot as the sphere began to suck Wraith and the others into it. Sylvia used her pressure to stop the absorption. Luckily, no one was injured, but the growing sphere caused great damage to the walls of the house and other items. After exhaling and resting, they decided it would make the most sense to call Nicola. Sylvia's magic had worked fine, but the problem was with the magic circle he drew. Since he was drawing it for the first time, he probably got the markings wrong and it was supposed to contain the spatial expansion within the bag itself, but it must have failed and allowed the expansion outside the bag in an explosive manner. For now, they were going to assess the damage first. This room was supposed to be the heart of the workshop, and it was the closest to the front, and also the most spacious. It was where the magic gem and most of the magical devices were supposed to be kept. There was sure to be some damage to the other rooms too, so Wraith felt so bad for ruining this. Nicola came and informed him that they would not be able to continue with their original plan. He accepted his fate but stated that he would throw all his savings and they would use that to make the best workshop ever. A few days later, The damage had been recovered and the place looked great on the outside. He wondered if Nicola managed to do what he asked, and entered the workshop. When he entered, he saw the permanent magic circles that draw energy from the magic gem, and greatly increased the efficiency of producing magical devices. They were built using mithril, which was both tough and great at conducting magical energy. Nicola informed him that they didn't even have the magic circles drawn on yet, so they weren't finished. She just prepared 5 of them that were not too big, so they wouldn't get in the way. As a material, nothing beats mithril in terms of magical conductivity. However, it was a precious material that was rare and hard to work with. Just as Daisy said, Nicola was amazing at what she did. She said that it was difficult to carve directly into mithril, so she asked him to use a specialized tool made of mithril. Once he was done, she was going to connect the circuit linking them to the magic gem. Wraith was nervous. He cannot afford to fail like he did the other day. It was a magic circle he was used to drawing, but he still had to be careful. He drew every single one of them very carefully, and now it was time for Nicola's connecting job. She suddenly started walking around with the gem for some reason, so Wraith asked what she was doing. She said that she was using magic to draw the circuit. He asked if he could watch as she worked, and she was fine with it. After that, Wraith asked if she was an adventurer like Daisy in the past. She thought Daisy told him that they had a love story, but he said that it was not. She said that there was such time like that, but Daisy refused to join anyone's party, and that was when Nicola approached her. It was love at first sight, as she said. Wraith asked why she stopped, and she said that part of the reason was that she wanted to focus on crafting, but the main reason was because of a certain someone she met who influenced her. Someone who guided her down the path of a craftsperson. She described that they were beautiful on the outside and intelligent and resolute on the inside. They were the kind of person she strived to be. Wraith wondered the name of that person, and she said that they were pretty famous. In this kingdom, they were known as heroes. They go by the name Elixirs, which was Wraith's mentor. He told Nicola to give up on trying to become like that person and gave her his guarantee as her disciple. Nicola was shocked by his reaction and remembered that she had heard that she had a cute disciple. She asked if he knew where she was now, but Wraith had no idea. She said that even though she heard him, she wouldn't give up trying to find a way to meet Elixirs one more time. Wraith realized what kind of person she was, so he didn't insist on her any longer. With that, their work was finished. She had made sure that all the magical devices could activate properly too. Wraith tested out and everything seemed in order. She reminded him to not hesitate to call her again if he was not satisfied or if there was anything else he wanted. Daisy and Sylvia appeared wondering what was going on. Wraith excitedly informed them that the magic circles were working, which meant his workshop was finally completed. In the next scene, Laffy hears the news and asks how was the workshop. He said that it was great, but then got interrupted by Amelia, who had been waiting to see him. She gave him something that he thought was a letter, but then explained that it was not a letter. It was a direct request from the royal family. In the next chapter, we see Elixirs fighting with a big monster while sipping her drink. She was in a hurry as she heard that Wraith was in the capital. When Wraith was 7 years old, he was with Elixirs and asked her how she became so amazing. She asked him what was the most important when it comes to alchemy, to which he responded that it was knowledge. She said that there was something much more important than that, and that something was practical experience. She put him in front of a monster, telling him to grab that fruit near its nest like it was easy for a 7-year-old while he was screaming out of his lungs. This was what Wraith saw in his dream, and he woke up falling from his chair. The place he was using both as a living and working space had become where he spent most of his time, and falling asleep while working on his alchemy had become a regular occurrence. But compared to when he was under his mentor's guidance, his life was much more comfortable now. But there was one thing he was a little worried about, which was the letter from the royal family. It was delivered as a direct request for him to come to the royal cast in 3 days. He wasn't planning to turn down a request from the royal family, but there was one problem. It scared him that they didn't even include what they wanted him to do. Speaking of scary things, he was also affected by his dream, as it was the first time he had a mentor since coming to the royal capital. The thought of his mentor coming to visit him occurred in his mind, but he decided that he was just overthinking it. He decided to do his morning routine and then go shopping. One of his habits was to take care of things around his workshop in the morning, such as accelerating plant growth with alchemy. His whole mood brightened as he remembered how small those plants were before. He finished tidying up his tool and it was time to do some shopping. He noticed a letter in the mailbox, and when he opened it, he saw that it was from Elixirs, which froze him. He rubbed his eyes to see if he wasn't dreaming, but it was from Elixirs. He went to Laffy and Sylvia, explaining that this was an emergency meeting and something terrible had happened. Laffy asked if it was about the direct request he received from the royal family, but it was something far more grave than that. The girls' expectations were high, and when he said that his mentor was coming, they just giggled. Laffy was confused and asked if they should throw a party, but he started panicking, saying that he needed to run away and get out of there right now. She knew where he lived, and he was scared that his peaceful life was in danger. Laffy told him to calm down and said that since she was his mentor, they already knew she was not a normal person, but she wondered if he had to go so far just to avoid her. Wraith was sure it would be a touching reunion if it were between a mentor and disciple with a good relationship, but he stated that his mentor was terrible and had no common sense. Laffy reminded him that she was the one who wanted to meet him so he could just give in and see her. Wraith said that when he was living with her, he had to cook all the meals, do all the cleaning and all the laundry, while also being on the verge of death all the time, so he didn't want to go back to that sort of hell again. Suddenly Lurims was in the room greeting Wraith. Even two S-ranked mages couldn't notice that she was in there, so the tension in the room increased. Wraith panicked and said that he had something very important to do, but Lurims grabbed his shoulder and sat next to him, saying that it had been so long since they had seen each other. As she noticed Laffy and Sylvia, she said that she didn't peg him as the type to go around picking up cute girls, and asked if they were both his girlfriends. Wraith explained that they were his friends and she was being rude to people she had just met, and this was the reason why she was still single. Lurims froze for a second and then smiled at him, saying that there was something on his face, and then flicked his nose. Even with a single flick, Wraith was thrown away like a feather. The girls were shocked to see her power. Laffy asked who was this lady. Lurims' whole mood changed and she introduced herself as Wraith's mentor, the one and only Lurims. Laffy also introduced herself and Sylvia. Wraith asked what she was doing here in the capital, and she said that an acquaintance of her had something they wanted her to do here, and took out a letter from the royal family from her breasts. Wraith was shocked that she had human acquaintances. She said that she had some history with the royal family, but she did not appreciate the fallen hero nickname they gave her. While she was praising Wraith, Sylvia realized something and asked if it was the Lurims who fought off a horde of giant dragons attacking the royal capital and helped rebuild the city afterward. Lurims was surprised that a young girl knew her, but apparently she was famous for being the apex of all mages. Wraith asked Laffy if that was true, and she said that it was true. However, after helping with the reconstruction, the compensation she demanded was pretty outrageous. As far as Wraith knew, she wasn't interested in money, so he thought they might mistaken her for someone else. But when Laffy explained that she demanded to be allowed to drink for free at every establishment in the royal capital, and she drank every one of them dry, and it went on for 3 days and 3 nights, and forced the reconstruction celebrations to be delayed, he knew it was Lurims. Sylvia told about Wraith and how he saved her life, and Lurims smirked at him. Wraith said that he also got the same request and asked if she was going to accept it. She said that it depended on what it was and she had to be careful because all that was written was to come. Wraith got even more suspicious, thinking why they would even hide from his mentor. Lurims wanted to teach Sylvia some magic while they were here, and she was so happy. Wraith wanted to tell her to not be invested in her, but when he saw her face, he couldn't say it. But there was the fact that Sylvia was an S-ranked adventurer, so even if she threw her into a dragon's nest, she would be able to take care of herself. Lurims decided to start tomorrow, and Wraith excused himself. Laffy and Sylvia had a request to get to after that. He asked Lurims what she was going to do, and she said that she didn't have anything to do right now, so she would follow him. They went to his workshop and she seemed to like it. Daisy was annoyed that Wraith was late, but then asked who that lady was. Lurims introduced herself, and Daisy wanted to confirm if she was the fallen hero, which she confirmed. The way Daisy stared at her made Lurims sweat like a nervous child. Wraith asked Daisy if she had enough time, and she said that she had received a rare ingredient today, and it would take more time than usual to process. Before they started, Daisy asked if there was something she came for, and Lurims offered to help out as an apology for holding up her disciple here. Daisy accepted and then showed them the rare ingredient. It was a plant found in the southern troops that is used in cooking and medicines. Lurims asked how she was going to use it, and Daisy said that they would use it for medicines. After confirming that they had enough of them, Lurims started the process. She said that Kern had heat-preserving and antibacterial properties, but the tiniest mistake in its processing could give it a unique stink and make it unsellable. She was good at controlling it with magic, so she was pretty comfortable. Daisy and Wraith were amazed. Lurims asked for magic bottles as they were best kept inside them, but Wraith was still making them. She decided to use her own and snapped her fingers. A bunch of bottles appeared in the room and Daisy was for sure amazed. She was waiting for her to praise her a little, but Daisy was not a person like that. Wraith said that the mentor used a style that blends alchemy and magic, so it was different from how he did things. This was the first time Daisy had seen someone able to use spatial magic and control magic at the same time and put Wraith and Lurims in the same place. Wraith objected that he didn't drink and do his chores and had more common sense than her. Lurims said that she knew all about how he could produce elixirs left and right, but Wraith reminded her that she was made elixirs to pay her drinking tabs. Daisy looked at them fighting and then at the bottles and realized that they were both people who didn't know their worth. The next chapter begins with Wraith questioning why Lurims was following him like it was the most natural thing in the world. She explained herself by saying that checking out their disciple's workshop was one of the duties of a mentor. Wraith gave up and told her to stay in her inn as she was already done with today's request. But Lurims was still dedicated to bothering him. Wraith asked her not to wander around too much. Even though she didn't want to, she accepted it. She then asked if he was planning to open a shop. He responded that he was interested, but he was still in the thinking process. As they entered, Lurims forgot everything he told her and started wandering around asking for everything. She started swinging in the hammock after picking and asking about everything and anything. Wraith wondered if she was planning on staying here while she was in the kingdom. She confirmed him, and Wraith realized that he would need to cook for her, deal with her laundry, and clean the unremovable stains again. While his mood became gloomy, she thought he was happy to be able to live with his mentor again. She also asked if he had some alcohol, but Wraith reminded her of his age. Wraith asked where she was all this time. She said that she was gathering ingredients and meeting friends. His mentor was able to use translocation magic, but it uses a large amount of magical energy, so she can't use it consecutively. She then wondered why he was in the capital, and he explained that monsters started showing up around that small house and he ran out of money too, so he wanted to sell potions. It was true that it had been rough ever since he left that house, and now he had been under the pressure of his mentor and the request from the royal family. Wraith decided to eat something, but Lurims didn't get up, saying she couldn't cook. He could not believe she did not know how to cook when she could use both alchemy and magic. It can be said without a doubt that Lurims was utterly unable to cook. The one time Wraith ate Lurims' cooking, he ended up immobilized from the stomachache. She decided to look at the other rooms while he was cooking. Lurims was thinking about how Wraith had grown up. She noticed a room, and when she went inside, the room was so cold. She immediately gets out of the room. She wondered if Sylvia helped with that, as Wraith can't use magic. She went to the last room. It was dim and a little moist, so she thought it was an empty room. But there was something in there. She thought it was a thief, and if it was, she wasn't planning on letting them go. While Wraith was cooking, he heard Lurims' scream and immediately went to find her. She was crying because there were bugs everywhere. Wraith explained that the bugs in this room were really useful because they were able to produce unique threads that could withstand having magic applied to them. It could be used for things like shoes and bags. To cheer her up, Wraith asked her to help him out with something after they had dinner. While eating, Lurims asked about the thing he wanted her to help out. He warned her not to speak while chewing and explained that it was about making a magical device. She was surprised that he couldn't make it, but he said that it required magic so he couldn't do it alone. Lurims proudly told him to leave it to his mentor. Wraith was glad that she was so enthusiastic, but he explained that he didn't need her to use her full power or anything. If she unleashes her full power, the capital won't be here tomorrow. She asked what they were going to make, and he said that it was a bag, the one that uses spatial expansion to fit all sorts of things inside it. All she had to do was apply the spatial magic. He was also hoping that she would lend a hand if anything went wrong. Having a mentor here was as good as having 100 people. He was even using a different method from before to make the bag. He used the thing that made Lurims cream earlier. More precisely, the threads produced by the bugs she saw. Those threads cannot be compared to mithril, and they had magical conductivity and high strength. They were nearly impossible to break with bare hands, and a single thread was capable of supporting the weight of a grown man. He showed the bag where he had inscribed the magic circle into the threads. After making sure there weren't any bugs in the bag, Lurims started the process. When she finished, Wraith questioned if it worked, but Lurims seemed pretty confident. He put something in the bag, and it was confirmed that the bag was working. Lurims expected something rebellious from him, but he comfortably thanked her. Lurims started crying, asking him to bring her out to drink. Wraith reminded her that he was still a minor, but when she told him that he could just drink juice, he did not have any more excuses to reject. In the next scene, Sylvia is in her first magic class with Lurims and Wraith. Lurims asked if she had any requests, and she wondered if she could teach her spatial magic. When Lurims said that she would teach Sylvia magic, she was worried about Sylvia, so he tagged along, but Sylvia looked happy. While he was thinking, Laffy asked Wraith if he was worried, and then told him that Sylvia wasn't that weak. She mentioned how rare it was to be able to get personal tutoring from the hero who saved the city from giant dragons, and it was a shame that she couldn't teach her too, as she was a swordsman. Wraith asked if it would be bad if she got hurt, and she said that of course it would be bad. Lurims suggested starting with translocation magic. This was a very high difficulty magic considered top class among the spatial magics. She told Sylvia to not worry about how difficult it was because she was talented, but she already seemed unenthusiastic. Laffy commented that Lurims decided on that on a whim, and Wraith confirmed that she had always been like that, but he mentioned that she could be trustworthy sometimes too. But Laffy understood that this would mean she could also be untrustworthy sometimes. Lurims started by showing Sylvia how it was done. When she disappeared and popped up in a different location, Sylvia started clapping. It would be unreasonable to tell her to do it straight away, so she decided to let her get a feel of it first. She holds her hands and releases the magic. As Sylvia felt the magic in her hands, it was time to try it right away. Sylvia was confused as she didn't know how to do it, but Lurims snapped her fingers and Sylvia disappeared. As they were shocked and worried, she appeared in the sky, falling right on Wraith. Wraith caught her in time and she was fine. Wraith knew this was Lurim's job, so he scolded her and threatened her that he would put a bug on her pillow tonight when she was about to sleep to make her regret what she did. Lurims asked Sylvia if she grasped the feeling from what she did, and Sylvia confirmed her. She then decided to work from there so she wouldn't forget that feeling. She said that the key was to remain aware of the connection between her target coordinates as she released her magic. They were going to start by translocating small objects such as one of Wraith's potions. She gave the potion to Sylvia and she tried to relocate the potion. She did manage to do it, but she accidentally broke the potion. However, Lurim said that even though there was some collateral damage, the translocation was a success. She added that a normal person wouldn't be able to do it, and now she just needs to focus on the connection part. If she doesn't, then it becomes easy to damage whatever she is translocating. Saliva asked what happens if she translocates a person at the time, and Lurim simply answered that they might end up split into two. And so the magic lesson that day ended with only one successful translocation attempt. Laffy asked when they met, and Lurim said that they first met about 7 years ago. A bunch of things happened after that, and Wraith became her disciple when he was 10. Sylvia said that it was amazing that the two of them met like that, and it was like a meeting of talent. Lurim said that she was acquainted with Wraith's parents to begin with. She never expected that those two would give birth to a child as suited to alchemy as Wraith. Sylvia was confused, so Wraith explained that his parents were adventurers, and they were strong enough to keep up with Lurim's. But as their child, he had no fighting ability. He didn't inherit an ounce of their talent or fighting. Instead, he had a completely unrelated talent for alchemy, and that's why Lurim's took him under her wing instead. He said that he didn't think he would have become Lurim's disciple if he had known about her true nature back then. Sylvia noted that she was so happy when she got to meet Lurim's. Lurims approached the girls and whispered something that made them smirk at Wraith. He asked what she told them, and she told them about how even though his words were so cold, he also had a cute side to him. She told them that Wraith sent her a present every year on her birthday, despite how he acted. He was very sweet. That night, when Wraith came home, everything was a mess and Lurims was holding a bottle of drink. Wraith was trying to figure out how that happened. A few hours ago, Lurims was begging to drink just one bottle, which she claimed wouldn't hurt. Obviously, Wraith refused to let her drink, but she insisted and reminded him that she helped him with the magic bag. He had to accept it, but only with the condition that it would be one bottle when they were having dinner. He had a bad feeling about this even though Lurims wasn't a stranger to drinking. He apologized to Sylvia in advance and then headed to make the dinner. He started cooking, but after a while he heard a loud noise, so he had to come back to the room she was drinking, which brings us to the present. Wraitha asked what happened, and Lafferty explained that Lurims started using her magic all of a sudden. At first glance, the bottle of alcohol still looked intact, but he figured that she used translocation magic to drink it straight from inside the bottle, and she was even using water magic to refill the bottle. Wraith told her to get back to her seat and promised to not blame her for drinking. She obviously denied that she was drunk. Laffy asked what they should do, but before Wraith could answer, a wind started to blow everything in the room. It was Lurims who could use magic even when she was drunk. Normally, magic was something that requires a lot of focus to use, but she was able to activate her magic using just the intuition she had ingrained into her body. Before she destroyed the house, Sylvia tried to nullify her magic and thankfully it worked. She passed out on the ground. Wraith gave her a potion to sober her up. He was now sure that he would never ever let her drink again. Laffy told Wraith to go ahead and take care of her while they cleaned up the place. He thanked Laffy and started dragging Lurims. He had an idea, so he let Lurims rest while he prepared something with rinafruit and sosogi. He was originally planning to test it out first, but he didn't have time for that. Lurims created a lot of trouble for Laffy and Sylvia, so he was hoping this would make for a good apology. He did some alchemist stuff, and then the liquid started growling. It looked like it didn't fail, so he was satisfied. Lastly, he added the sosogi. It was his first time making something other than a potion, but it went smoothly. He went back to the room and it was cleaner than before. He showed them what he just did and said that it was a token of his appreciation. They asked what it was, but he decided to show them. He turned off the lights and the bottle started shining. The girls seemed to like it. When rinafruit is liquefied, it shines with different colors depending on the light source. Sosogi was a plant that absorbed magical energy from the ground and released it as light when it was dark. When you combine them with alchemy, it gives off a really beautiful light which was very popular in the kingdom. They thanked him and had to leave as they still had that direct request business tomorrow. One of the great noble families that existed in the kingdom was the Linford family. They were the descendants of an illustrious herbalist who participated in a war more than 100 years ago. They also had exceptional talent in magic, and were known for their many achievements on the battlefield. In recognition of their accomplishments, they became one of the 4 great noble families of the kingdom. Since then, The Linford family has produced generation after generation of makes and herbalists and protected the land. Seth Linford, the eldest son in the family, was being scolded by his sister Leisha for sighing, as she believed happiness escapes when you sigh. Even if she told him to not be like that, he was still in a gloomy mood. She tried to make him smile and told him that he looked better when he smiled. She asked if he was thinking about Orda. He did think about him, and he was also sad that there wasn't any news. She then asked if that was about what their father spoke earlier about the royal family. Seth didn't answer her, which meant that she was right. Leisha told her big brother that he wanted Seth to succeed in the family, but not at the expense of his happiness. He responded that he wasn't opposed to succeeding the family, and besides, if he were to abandon his role, then his responsibility would fall to Orda. Orda, Seth's younger brother, exceeded his older brother in both herbalist and wizard abilities. As a result, he believes he is a better prospect to lead the family than Seth and harbors enmity toward him. However, succeeding in the family entails inheriting the territory. Therefore, one must excel not just in abilities but also in character. Even though he possessed exceptional abilities, his troubled nature made him far from the perfect option to lead the family. Leisha reminded Seth that their father was thinking about letting him succeed in the family, so there shouldn't be problems if all goes well. He told Leisha that depending on how this business with the royal family goes, even the proper line of succession may be overruled. A short while ago, a direct order from the royal family arrived, and Leisha hadn't heard the contents of the letter, but she knew that there were two people chosen to accomplish the order. Seth was going to try his best, but he also said that it was a fact that Orda had greater abilities than him. If only he was more capable than Orda, they wouldn't be having this problem right now, he said. Leisha tried to explain to him, but he interrupted her, saying that it would be fine and he would come up with something. She really hoped nothing bad would happen. Seth teased his sister and then left to see his father. He feels bad about worrying Leisha so much. As he walked into the hall, he saw Orda. Orda started talking to him with a petty tone and offered to meet their father together. Seth couldn't refuse him, and they started walking. The reason why he couldn't was because no one knew what he would say if he turned him down. As they walked, Orda was talking about how this was an excellent opportunity to show their father which of them was most suited to succeed in the family, while all Seth could think was to study on his own. Meanwhile, at Wraith's house, Lurims woke up falling from where she slept. She looked like an insect to Wraith. She started rubbing her body on Wraith, asking to be taken care of by him. However, whatever she says, Wraith was glaring at her. He told her to complain later and get ready because they were going to the royal castle today. The day they received the direct request from the royal family was finally here. Wraith felt the need to make sure not to give a bad impression. On the other hand, seemed pretty comfortable, but Wraith scarily smiled at her, reminding her that they were running late again because of her. Before she got ready, she thought about how naggy Wraith was and missed his old cute self. With one snap of a finger, she was ready to go. She wanted to get breakfast, but Wraith said that there was no time for that, and if she needed someone to blame, she should blame herself. Lurims was whining while they were walking on the street as she was hungry, but Wraith ignored her and asked how familiar she was with the royal family. She said that she got rid of those giant dragons for them, so he had a lot of leeway. Sounded convenient to Wraith, but she explained that they didn't want her to cut them off so they could use her. She left this kingdom because it would be a pain to stick around doing their chores. He didn't know she had all that going on. She started giggling and warned him to be careful as her disciple. She said that from the kingdom's perspective, they would already have figured out that she was a free-spirited type, and they knew it was really hard to get hold of her to ask for things. With that in mind, the next thing they would have their eye on would be her disciple. In other words, Wraith might end up getting lots of requests in her place from now on. Wraith didn't want to be her gopher. They walked enough to see the castle. Lurims started running as they might have lots of things to eat when they got there. Wraith tried to stop her, but it was useless. She was just like a kid. There was a possibility that they might not prepared food for them, which could make her angry. When they arrived at the gate, Wraith was shocked at how huge it was. The soldiers came and stopped them from getting in, but when they showed the letter they got from the royal family, they apologized right away and showed them the way. While walking, Lurims mentioned that the dragons were about as big as this castle. Wraith was shocked, but then someone bumped into him. It was Orda, and he called them plebeians. Lurims was furious and questioned what was his problem. As they didn't know him, Wraith wondered if that person was also called to the castle. Lurims said that this was not his fault because he already apologized and he still shoved him on purpose. The maids came and apologized for making them wait. Wraith had a bad feeling about all this. They went inside the room and saw both Seth and Orda waiting. Wraith was confused that they were putting them in the same waiting room as nobles, and the guy from earlier was here too. Lurims couldn't care less about them and only focused on how hungry she was. Seth stood up and approached them. He smiled and introduced himself and then offered some snacks. They thanked him and introduced themselves too. Seth wondered what business they had, and Wraith responded that he was Lurim's disciple, and he was here to accept a request. Seth guessed that Wraith was just like them. Both he and his younger brother Orda over there were here on the orders from the royal family. This made Orda laugh, and he told Seth that respectable nobles such as them shouldn't be mingling with the common fold. Doing so would call their prestige into question. Seth snapped and told him that this was none of his business, but he didn't seem bothered by Seth's words. Wraith could see that they weren't getting along very well, but all he wanted was actually to go home. The preparations were all done and they were ready to enter. However, they were shocked to see Orda appearing in the middle of them, excusing himself. Seth apologized for his brother's behavior. They entered the room and the father of the royal family told them to raise their heads and be at ease. Lurimis greeted Velber like he was her closest friend, asking if he had gotten older. After rumbling for a second, Velber said that not even he could win against age. Lurims asked why he called them here and she was sure he didn't want to have a friendly chat. Velber said that the two Linfords here already knew why they were here, and he decided to explain to Lurims and her disciple who were still in the dark. He only had one request, which was the recovery of the symbol of this country, the crystal dragon. The dragon had been worshipped as the symbol of this kingdom for over 300 years, and it was an extremely rare dragon with the ability to produce crystals. He wanted them to save that dragon. Normally its crystals do not crack or discolor, but recently they have begun deteriorating and taking on a dark hue. Even now its body was slowly shrinking. Lurims wanted to confirm that he wanted them to heal this crystal dragon. While Lurims was saying that she couldn't guarantee they would be able to heal it, Orda stepped up and told the king to not worry. He promised to heal this dragon for him. Lurimis didn't like how he was talking big, so she said that her disciple over here would definitely be able to do it too. The king was surprised because Wraith was pretty young. Lurim said that this wouldn't be a problem because Wraith was far more capable than the kiddo over there. Wraith told her not to raise the hurdle for him and promised the king to do his best not to disappoint. Lurims decided to get down to business and asked if anything like that had ever happened before. The king has not been able to confirm any past cases like that. She asked the king to tell them what it normally eats, where it spends its time, and so on. He responded that it eats only metals and usually spends time with his daughter going out in the yard and around the castle. Wraith wanted to take a closer look. The dragon seemed a little uneasy, but it stood still. Wraith used his analysis to see and examine the dragon pretty closely. From his reaction to something, the king asked if he had figured out something. He said that looking at those dark discolorations, it was probably many tiny metals inside the crystal. The king said that the crystal dragon should be completely digesting the metals within its body. Wraith explained that it was either that it wasn't digesting the metals, or that something was happening after it was digested. Either way, he said that the dragon's insides were being clogged. The dissolved metals were normally carried to the surface of the body through its vessels, but now edible metals were blocking those vessels. And then the dissolved metals that come after that would not be able to pass through properly. As a result, he believed that the flow of fluids in its vessels had been halted and was causing a buildup. He then asked if the crystal dragon had been consuming metals as usual recently, and the king said that it wasn't. This could be instinctively feeling a danger to its life and senses, that any further buildup of fluid could very well cause its vessels to burst. In human terms, it must be as painful as bursting your blood vessels. Wraith felt so bad for the dragon and promised to find a way to save it. The king asked if he had any ideas to heal it, and he said that he could try one of the ideas he had thought of right now. The king allowed him to do that, and Wraith approached the dragon. At first, dragon didn't let him touch itself, so he tried to calm it down by saying he was going to save it. He used transform magic on the dragon. Unlike magic, alchemy works on the practitioner's existing material and has to do with the power of influence. With that power, it may be possible to remove the metals inside the dragon's crystals. Of course, this skill had limits, but Wraith's influence was stronger than Lurimis's. Unfortunately, this idea didn't work on the dragon. Wraith should have known it wouldn't be that simple. Lurims suggested thinking of something else. Wraith apologized to King and stated that this was all he could do for now and they were going to come back at a later date when they found a way to resolve this. Before they left the castle, Orda warned him to not get ahead of himself. Seth came and wanted to negotiate with him. In the next chapter, Lurims brought Seth and Wraith to a local place to eat something as she was starving. After eating, Seth asked Wraith to lend him his aid. Wraith was confused, so he asked if he meant he wanted credit for it. Seth corrected him that he was fine with him being the one to complete the request, but the one thing he wanted to avoid was his brother being the one to complete it. Wraith was fine with anyone as long as they could get it done, as the request was for the country's symbol. Seth said that if it was from the royal family, it didn't matter who completed the request, but for him, it was a personal matter. He explained that he was the eldest son of a family that had been considered the top among the noble families. By the proper line of succession, he would be the one to succeed the family. Lurimes knew that they were one of the great noble families known for their herbalists, and they hated her. Seth confirmed that Lurimes was a good alchemist to practically invalidate the existence of herbalists, so in a sense she was their competitor. Back to the issue at hand, depending on the outcome of this request, the successor of the family might just become his younger brother, which is what he was trying to avoid at all costs. That's why he wanted to cooperate with him. Wraith thought about it for a second and agreed to take him up on that. This was not a bad deal because he could have more funds for his shop, and unlike Orda, Seth was pleasant and humble. But there was one thing he was curious about. He asked why he was aiming to take over the family. Seth explained that his younger sister wanted this, and he also didn't want to leave things to Orda's hands. They sat next to him, teasing him for being cute. Seth got embarrassed, so Wraith told him that it was a respectable reason. He also mentioned that he was easy to talk to for a noble. It was true that he tried not to give a standoffish impression, but even so, Seth wondered if he didn't feel the need to be more reserved. He said that he didn't have any experience dealing with people of high status like the Our Great families, but if someone was nice to him, he would want to be friendly with them regardless of their status. As for Seth, he had always lived bound by his status. Regardless of how he felt, others would always reinforce his status on him. That's why he was glad to meet someone like him. They shook hands as he told him that he was looking forward to working with him. Now it was time to discuss their plans. Wraith asked what he knew about the Crystal Dragon, and he said that the Crystal Dragon wasn't even something that the nobles have the chance to see normally, so he didn't have any more information than him. Wraith also didn't have any concrete plans for now. Lurimes stated that it would be great if she could try a few experiments, but that would not be possible as they were dealing with the country's symbol. The problem was finding out about those metals. Metals that the Crystal Dragon can't dissolve, or that return to their former state after being dissolved. He asked Seth if there was anywhere in the kingdom where liquid metals were handled. If they could find a liquid metal that could change its state easily, it might be able to meet the conditions he mentioned earlier. And to find out more, they would need to go somewhere that handles liquid metals that were in circulation in the kingdom. He looked at Lurimes, but she only knew where to get a drink in this city. Wraith thought about who would work with liquid metals and then had an idea. Lurimes asked if he had someone, but Wraith was sure it would be bad if Lurimes and that person met. He started brainstorming, which made Lurimes annoyed. She told them to go right now, and they started going somewhere. Lurimes took them to a girl who seemed so excited to see Lurimes. She couldn't even believe she was seeing her. Her name was Nicola, but Lurimes didn't remember her at first. However, after a second she told her that she was the one who nursed her when she was drunk all those years ago. Wraith was about to leave there in embarrassment. He said that they came here today because they were doing a request that required them to look into liquid metals. Nicola seemed to think something was up, but that was inevitable if they had a noble and an alchemist taking on the same request. She said that she knew about several places, so she asked if they were looking for anything specific. He asked if any metals change easily between solid and liquid form. When he touched the crystals of the dragon, he felt a warmth, as if there was blood flowing inside it. If the surface was already that warm, the inside must be even warmer, he assumed. Nicola heard that a new type of liquid metal was imported recently from the south. Wraith guessed that its name was silverite, and he was right. But she said that not much of it was imported, so there wasn't anything left. Seth said that even knowing that was a big help as he could pass the word to his family and have them procure it. Wraith said that it wouldn't work. To start with, just getting silverite was a matter of luck. Silverite was only found in volcanic areas, and it was also found near another metal that looked practically identical to it and can't be told apart normally. Since silverite was a liquid metal, you could find it by looking at its liquid form when the volcano was not active. But on the volcanoes where there was silverite, there were spirits. Spirits dwell within natural phenomena, and they could only be seen by magic with high magical aptitude. So those spirits were also able to influence the activity of the volcano. Nicola was sorry about not being able to help them more, but Wraith said that she had helped them a lot. He also wanted her to help them out looking for any remaining silverite still in the kingdom. He also said that in exchange, they would let her have Lurimes. Hearing this, Nicola accepted to help them pretty willingly. Wraith told Seth to try to procure some through his family too, or confirm whether the royal family still had any left. 5 days passed and they had nothing. Wraith asked once again if they found anything. Seth tried to procure some, but it was to no avail, and the royal family did not have any left over either. Nicola couldn't get any either. Wraith decided to get it from the source, but even if they go there, it would be difficult to tell it apart from the look-alike metal even with his analysis. He asked if Lurimes could cool down the silverite with magic, but there was no way she could. She said that it might work in a place without spirits around, but she wouldn't want to mess with them as they were so powerful. But she said that she could do it if she got their permission to use her magic. Wraith was shocked that she could talk to them. She said that sometimes the spirits of the larger natural phenomena were intelligent and it would be nice if they were friendly. Otherwise, they might end up getting burnt to a crisp. It looked like their best bet was to talk to the spirits. Wraith asked if she could win against them if they got on their bad side, and Lurim's was negative. Then it looked like he would have to do something about it. He said that if his mentor can't win against them, they would have to make a magical device that could win against them, specifically a device for increasing magical energy, and he would also make a ring that could amplify magical power. Lurim's informed Wraith that she didn't know any magic circle to do that. Wraith explained that it was something new he came up with while she was gone, and he was sure she would be able to make it on easily too. Lurim's denied, saying that a complicated magic circle like that was too much even for her, and he was the one who could make something like that. In the next scene, Wraith was going to start the process. He couldn't use magic himself, so it was a big help for Seth and Lurim's to be here to help him test them out. He took out a scarlet crystal, which was not an alchemical material. Wraith explained that it was perfect for magical strengthening. He started drawing the circle, but Seth had a bad feeling about this. Wraith asked who would like to try it first when he finished, and Seth didn't seem so willing. Lurim's went ahead first. Seth asked if that was going to be okay. Wraith said that it was just emitting light, so it wasn't like it could hurt anyone. The moment Lurim's touched the circle, their eyes shone because of how big the light was. In the next chapter, Sylvia and Laffy saw the flash coming out of their house and went inside. As a result of testing out the light magic on the magic strengthening device Wraith created, 3 of them sustained major eye damage from seeing a blinking light as bright as a second sun. Laffy said that they were fortunate they just happened to be passing by. Sylvia prepared dinner and asked if they could move. Lurim's hardly stood up when she heard the word dinner. Seth reminded Wraith that this is why he asked whether it would be okay. Wraith was sorry about that, but at least they now confirmed the effectiveness of the magic circle firsthand. However, Seth stated that he could have lived without experiencing it firsthand. He found him very abnormal because there was no way a normal alchemist could do something like that. He then noticed that Laffy and Sylvia were looking at him with questions, so he introduced himself. Seeing Laffy's face, Wraith decided to explain. He said that he met Seth because they were working on the same request from the royal family and were injured because they were doing an experiment related to that request. Sylvia commented how Wraith was always getting into trouble. Wraith then stated that he had a favor to ask Laffy and Sylvia. Laffy just hoped it wouldn't be something pointless. He said that there was somewhere he would like them to come with them. When Laffy asked where it was, he said that it was Ululu Volcano, one of the largest volcanoes in the Delix Mountains that reach into the south. The volcano had been worshipped as an area that spirits have inhabited since prehistoric times. In the next scene, Wraith was thanking her for coming along because he wouldn't feel at ease if it were just the 3 of them. Laffy didn't mind because she did owe him a debt of gratitude. Wraith blushed and started mumbling some things about how it was pretty reassuring to have 2 S-ranked adventurers with them. Laffy then changed the subject and mentioned the spirits there to make the mountain itself all red. Lurim's mentioned that if you stayed out late in these mountains, you would get hit with a curse fire. Spirits were existences superior to humans, and spirits that took the shape of humans or animals were especially strong. She knew that had probably already noticed their existence and explained that the salamander spirit keeps a high guard around outsiders. Wraith just hoped that they would reason with them. Wraith decided to head to the village they saw for now. The village was peaceful and laid back. Sylvia suddenly gasped Wraith's name. Wraith immediately assumed something bad happened and asked what was going on, but it was just a cute plushie that she saw. The other girls also seemed interested in the plushies while Seth and Wraith stood there. The seller explained that those were dolls based on Salamander who lives here on Ululu Volcano. They were a little different from what Seth imagined. The seller said that if they were trying to go up the volcano, they couldn't do that now. Wraith wanted to know the reason, and she said that they should be able to see from here that the surroundings of the volcano were red and distorted. That was due to the power of Salamander. It was making the entire volcano too hot for humans to enter. Just a few minutes near the volcano would dry them out, but if they still insist on going to the volcano, the only way is to wait for Salamander to fall asleep. Wraith took something from his pocket and said they could do something about that using that. The woman said that magical deception wouldn't be enough to protect them from Salamander's power, but Wraith just wanted to try it out a little. The seller giggled and warned them to be careful as they walked out of the shop. Meanwhile, Salamander was already angry that those foolish humans were daring to trespass on his territory. But he was sure mere humans like them could not stand against the heat of his power. As they started walking towards the volcano, no one was sweating. Wraith was glad that it was working as expected. He knew he had given everyone a ring of impact resistance and the 3 magic rings of magic strengthening, but each ring could only be used once, so he warned them to be careful how they used them. Seth asked how this magical device protected them from the spirit's power when not even magic itself could. They all counted on Wraith for that and said they were okay. Suddenly, a voice said that it wasn't okay. Wraith asked if they heard it, but Laffy didn't hear anything. Sylvia asked how far they needed to go, and Lurim's responded that it depended on where the spirit was. Wraith wondered if it would get mad and come out if we just randomly attacked the mountain. He kicked a stone as a joke to show what he meant. But to his surprise, what he said happened, and a monster came out. Laffy scolded Wraith for attracting the monsters, but he did not expect something like that to show up and called the monster short-tempered. The more surprising thing happened, and the monster objected to him. He said that he wasn't short-tempered. Wraith heard him talking, but Laffy said that monsters cannot talk. The monster started spinning, so Laffy took out her sword and started attacking. Lurim stated that this terrain wasn't good and that the monster's back was pretty tough. That meant that its belly, which wasn't covered by rocks, was its weak point. He used his transform ability to hit its belly and let Laffy attack its weak points. Laffy gripped her sword and jumped as high as she could. She managed to attack its belly and defeat the monster. She safely landed and started scolding Wraith for doing stupid things that drew out monsters. Wraith was still trying to convince her that they might be able to get the spirits if they kept this up. However, seeing Laffy's glare, he immediately gave up. He was the one being protected, so he couldn't complain, so he decided to just follow her orders. As they continued on their way, they saw that the road was cracked. Lurim suggested finding another way, but Wraith said he would make a path with transformation. He slid his hands on the ground, but when he was about to do it, he heard that voice again. It told him to not meddle with its territory and it would not allow it. When Wraith looked above, he saw a giant bird coming right at them. He yelled at everyone to run. Wraith asked Laffy if she could do something about this, but the bird didn't look like it was coming down there anytime soon. Seth decided that this was an emergency, so he was going to use his ring. He tried to use his wind magic, but suddenly his magic fell off. He couldn't control anything and it was about to explode. Not even a second later, an explosion happened and Seth started falling. As he was falling, he recalled a memory of him and his sister talking before he went on this trip. He told her that Wraith would make some magical devices for them. She was giggling and stated that this was wonderful. Seth asked what it was, and she said that this was the most fun she had seen him having recently, and she was really happy that he was having fun. Seth explained that it was because Wraith was someone who could talk casually to a person from the great noble families. Suddenly his brother Orda came and started insulting and degrading him again. Seth told him that this had nothing to do with him. Orda responded that Seth was free to debase himself as much as he pleased, and told him to be careful tomorrow. The way he left there made Seth wonder if he did something back then. As he lost his hope and will to live, he apologized to everyone in his head and let himself fall. However, he did not expect Wraith to jump in with him to save him. Wraith stretched his arm as much as he could and grabbed Seth's wrist. He pulled him and used his ring to use his impact resistance. He managed to land without any serious injuries. He asked Seth if he was okay and he confirmed that he was. Wraith then wondered if something happened back there. Seth explained that his brother probably cast interference magic on him in advance. Wraith wondered if that was normal for brothers connected by blood because that could kill him. Seth didn't seem to be surprised that much and just thanked Wraith for saving his life. He then asked how they could get out of there. They didn't have his impact resistance ring or Seth's magic strengthening ring anymore. This volcano was teeming with monsters, so they should try to regroup with Laffy and the rest, but they had no way of knowing their situation from down there. He wondered if they should stay and wait, but Seth called his name, and when he looked at him, he saw a giant snake looking at them. They started running away from the snake until they managed to escape. They ran pretty far, so they had no idea where they were. Quite a lot happened since they entered this volcano, like being attacked by monster after monster. He then heard that voice again, telling him that he would not allow him to meddle with his territory. Wraith asked Seth if he had been hearing something like a muffled voice ever since they came to this volcano. Seth hadn't heard anything like that and asked if he had heard it. Wraith believed that it might be just his imagination. He then noticed a red rock and recalled seeing that earlier. Seth responded that this place was full of rocks like that, just in case Wraith decided to leave a mark on it. They continued walking until they saw the rock they had marked earlier, which confirmed that they had been walking in circles. They sat and started thinking about a way to get out of this place. Wraith thought about finding whoever was responsible for trapping them in this loop, but that was hard for them when they were stuck here. Seth said that if this was spatial magic, they might have connected specific coordinates they set to create the loop. Wraith started smirking because they might be able to destroy those coordinates using a blast of earth transformation magic. Seth understood what he meant and tried to stop him, but he said that real man put their all into everything they do. He started walking while Seth tried to calm him down, but as he told him to have some self-awareness, something exploded. Meanwhile, the girls were wondering where they could be. Sylvia asked what was going to happen now, and Lurims responded that he could feel that they were still on the volcano, but the location of the magic was strange. She said that they might be mixed up in some spatial magic, but as long as she could feel their magic, that meant they were still alive. Sylvia wondered who else could have made a high level of spatial magic. Lurims turned and glanced at her plushie. She said that it had to be that. Salamander must have already recognized them as enemies, and talking this out would be tough. Something started roaring and told them that this place was its backyard and it would not let humans do as they please here. The wind shaped like a monster appeared, and there it was, Spirits of Salamander. Lurim sweetly stated that they just wanted to talk to him a little, but Salamander told them to leave now. Lurims whispered to Sylvia to be ready to use her magic at any time. She then told Salamander that they only came to this volcano to get a certain metal that could be found there. And they would like him to release their 2 companions that have been trapped with his magic. He said that he would not allow it and that they were going to remain here forever. Lurims responded that he would regret it if he didn't release them. Salamander had enough and started coming at them, but then something exploded and he stopped. He was confused, so Lurimis figured that it must be Wraith. A scream was heard and something fell on the ground. It was Wraith and Seth. He never thought he would have to fall from a fatal height twice in the same day, which was exactly why Seth was trying to stop him. They would be done for if they didn't still have one more ring of impact resistance. Wraith completely ignored what he said and smiled at Lurims. She pointed behind him, and when he checked, he saw a salamander. It was obvious that both sides were so shocked to see each other. Wraith said that based on the findings of his highly capable assistant here, he blasted them out using his alchemy. Salamander didn't believe him because there was no way that he could have used alchemy as he pleased within the territory he controlled. Wraith didn't know that and giggled as if it wasn't something so surprising. Even Lurim said that it might be easier to use here than magic, but it should be limited. He concluded that he might be somewhat of an exception. This made Salamander furious and it started roaring again. Lurimis told Sylvia to nullify his magic. As the blaze was coming at them, the ring that Wraith gave her worked and protected them. Salamander was shocked. This magic-strengthening ring she got from Wraith boosted her power more than 10 times. Salamander decided to not hold anything back and turn them all to ash this time. This time, Lurims combined her power with her ring and attacked him. After the attack, everyone gasped because Salamander was gone. Wraith then noticed something moving. It was a little animal. It looked exactly like the doll Saliva bought. It started running towards them, but Saliva caught it. She seemed to love it while Salamander was telling her to let him go. Wraith was shocked this thing was Salamander. He wondered if this was its true form, but it said that he simply used too much power. Lurims grabbed it and said that it didn't have enough power left to pose a threat, then smiled. Salamander seemed amazed by Lurimis' face for a second, but then tried to bite her. Lurims laughed and tried to smack it, but the others tried to stop her. As they all calmed down, Wraith stated that they had come to this volcano to get a certain metal. For that, they needed him to dispel the magic that it had cast on this volcano. However, Salamander still didn't negotiate with them. It didn't see any point in yielding to the demands of some invaders. Asked if it was still saying that even in this situation, Saliva told Salamander that there was something they needed here, and asked politely if he would not let them have it. Seeing the shimmer in her eyes, he gave up and told them to leave the moment they had it. Saliva got so happy that she could convince him and hugged him tightly. Wraith felt like he somehow lost against him, and Seth figured that he must not have liked his attitude. Salamander stopped the magic and led them to the place where Silverite was. He warned them to not do anything unnecessary. Wraith thanked him and told everyone to grab it. With that, the procurement of the Silverite was done. In the next scene, Seth came back to Linford residence and his sister greeted him. She asked if he was hurt and he responded that thanks to everyone, they managed to achieve their objective. Seth asked Orda and she seemed confused. Orda came and boldly talked to him as always. Seth asked if he cast interference magic on him. He denied doing such a thing and acted like he heard him. Seth asked if he was making progress on the request on his end, and he said that he was getting there. He told Seth to sit tight and let him handle it. Seth clenched and was about to say something back, but then noticed Leisha was staring at him. She asked what this was about and pinched his cheeks. Seth explained that it wasn't the first time he had done something like this, and he would punish him accordingly when he became Lord. Lucia said that she was really worried about him, and as punishment, he had to go shopping with her. Seth had no choice but to clear a day in his schedule. Meanwhile, Wraith was in the town looking at stuff. After the volcano, Laffy and Sylvia went back home to start on their next request, and Seth went to his sister while Lurims just started drinking. He did tell Seth about the day that they were going to experiment on Silverite, but he seemed pretty busy. Lurims was probably staying out all night anyway, so he had only one problem left. He went to a girl's shop. When he entered inside, all the women there started whispering about him, wondering what he was doing there. As he was trembling from nervousness, he tried to motivate himself by saying he was just here to buy a present for Laffy and Sylvia. A woman's voice was heard, asking if it was Wraith. He immediately recognized the voice. It was Amelia. She asked what he was doing in a place like that, and he explained that he was just there to buy a present for Laffy and Sylvia. Amelia was puzzled, so he added that they helped him out a lot the other day. Amelia looked disappointed suddenly, and then asked if he had made up his mind yet. Wraith responded that he couldn't decide and didn't know what they would find cute or what they would like. He asked if she could help him pick something up. Amelia was happy to help him. He said that he was thinking of giving them dolls. He recalled that Laffy liked cute things. This was a surprising fact about her because her strength and boldness were enough to put a man to shame. Amelia warned him to not say those things in front of her. Wraith said that she turned him down before when he tried to give her an accessory, so he was afraid the same thing might happen with a doll. Amelia started looking at him weirdly. She figured that she must have been too embarrassed to accept it. She was a pure girl, but it would be more interesting if he didn't know, so she decided not to tell him. She offered to choose one for him and Wraith was so relieved. However, she picked the worst doll in the whole store. Wraith couldn't even understand if it was a mouse, fish, or a chimera. Meanwhile, Amelia thought it was pretty cute. Wraith showed a rabbit doll and asked her opinion on that. She thought about it for a moment and then stated that it was nice, but the one she chose was better and she was almost sure Laffy would love it. The problem was that Wraith forgot that people had different ideas of cute, but he can't see that thing as cute at all and it irritated him a little. But Amelia took the time to help him pick it out, so he couldn't just refuse to buy it. He brainstormed a way to not buy that thing. He decided to get both of them and not give the weird one to the girls. The next day he went to Laffy and Sylvia's house and gave them their presents. Laffy blushed and thanked him calmly. Sylvia thanked Wraith properly and explained that Laffy loves cute things, but she was too embarrassed to buy any, so she was really happy. Wraith was glad they liked them, but Lurims appeared behind him and she seemed so displeased. She asked what those ugly things were. He explained that he didn't want to buy them either. Wraith then mentioned their second present. He said that it would be boring if he just gave them dolls, so he thought about something that they could use as adventurers. He suggested making them some weapons. They both seemed interested in the weapons that Wraith would make. Wraith hadn't made weapons since coming to the capital, but he was sure it would work out. He decided to make a sword first, so he asked Laffy if she had any requests. She said that she just needed to be sharp and sturdy. Laffy had strong physical abilities, so her weapon would need to be able to keep up with her. If it's something that doesn't break as soon as she swings it, Laffy shouldn't be too much trouble. He asked her to show him the current sword she used. She was the kind of person who could get by just using her swordsmanship and physical strength. Her sword was heavy because she didn't feel like she was swinging anything if it was too light. Based on that weight, the thickness of the blade, the grip, and the length, he figured that a good material would be orichalcum. Laffy said that he didn't need to use such a precious material, but Wraith didn't use it that much himself, so it was okay. He put the charcoal and orichalcum into the lit furnace and took the heated orichalcum out a few times. As the orichalcum started glowing, he used material strengthening and started hammering the stone. The light was transferred from the hammer he was using to the orichalcum. Lastly, he used transform magic and they needed to wait for it to cool. In the meantime, he decided to make Sylvia's staff and asked if she had any requests. She said that she wanted it to be light enough that it wasn't a hindrance when she was moving around. Beyond just supplementing a mage's activation of their magic, staff also has the purpose of amplifying its power. For that reason, it was often made with ores that conduct magical energy easily, which made them heavy. He was thinking of using mithril, but he wanted to try using something else too. The most important thing when making a staff is the place where the magic that passes through it exists. Normally, that was where a magic gem would be, but Wraith had a different idea. He took out something he used to make those rings of magic strengthen. He added a little holy water to the tip and the staff was done. Sylvia was shocked at how quickly he created a staff for her. He said that it was a lot less work than a sword, so he could ship it up in a flash. The sword would take a little more time, so he suggested trying out the staff right now. He asked Laffy if she could wait until tomorrow for her sword, and she was okay with that. They went outside and Wraith tried to find a place with slimes from the request. Laffy and Sylvia felt nostalgic as it had been a long time since they went slime hunting. When they saw some slimes, Wraith asked if they were resistant to magic and physical attacks. Laffy said that he could still cut them if he swung his sword fast enough. But they came here to test the staff, not the sword, so he told them to try holding back. Sylvia started using her new staff. She was using wind magic. If Wraith remembered correctly, practiced mages could use it to split a monster cleanly in two. Sylvia tried to split the slimes, but she ended up splitting the ground. They didn't expect it to be this powerful. For now, Wraith decided to collect the slime's cores. He noticed that something was wrong with Laffy. She said that she felt like they were being watched. He asked if she was still feeling it, but she said that it disappeared when she turned around. Sylvia guessed that they might be after Wraith's elixirs. They told them not to worry because both were there to protect him. Meanwhile, a butler was reporting what Wraith had been doing to a man. He said that he went to the forest with 2 S-ranked adventurers to hunt slimes. The man asked if he did anything, and the butler stated that the 2 S-ranked adventurers seemed very close to him, and one of them noticed his presence and went on guard, so making a move would have been difficult. The nameless man ordered him to keep watching them, and he left matters to his discretion if an opportunity arises. They were waiting for Laffy and Sylvia to leave him alone. The next day, Laffy and Sylvia were in Wraith's house, and Wraith was having a hard time dragging her new sword. The sword was too heavy for Wraith, but Laffy lifted it pretty easily and thanked him. He asked if she was going to try it out on anything, but she said that she didn't need to try it out to know that it was good because it was made by Wraith. They had a request to go, so they excused themselves. Seth and Wraith were alone now, and Seth commented how they trusted him a lot. Wraith got shy and tried to change the subject. They finally had the silverite they were after. It was a precious material, so they needed to be careful. They opened the box they put the silverite in. Suddenly, the lights were gone and something threw Wraith out. Seth immediately figured that this was a magic attack and they weren't the only ones here. Wraith couldn't see anyone in the room, so Seth decided to smoke them out. A man with a hoodie came at Seth and they started whistling. Seth passed out after a strong kick in his stomach. He didn't finish Seth off and turned to Wraith, which was confusing. Wraith realized that they were after the silverite. 1 second before he touched the silverite, Lurim's voice was heard. She told him to not move an inch. She said that if he kept troubling her disciple, he would be lucky to get off with just a few broken bones. The man threw his knives at where she was, but Lurim's was already behind him. She threw him on the ground and told him to not underestimate her just because she was a woman. She asked Wraith what was going on, and he explained that they didn't know it either. For now, she decided to see who this person was first and took out his hoodie. Seth immediately recognized this man. He was Orda's underling. Wraith asked what he was planning to do, and Seth said that there was nothing they could do. If Orda knew that his attempt to interfere was foiled, he would just try something else again. They tied him up and started working on their business. 5 days later, they went to the king. The king asked if they come up with a way to save the crystal dragon, and Lurim's responded boldly that they wouldn't have come here otherwise. Wraith didn't wait any further and got close to the dragon. It was even weaker than before. Lurim's helped him make this magic device. They had the idea of applying freezing magic to the mineral, and then having the crystal dragon swallow it to turn the silverite within its body back to a liquid state. The dragon sniffed the mineral and ate it. Now it was Wraith's turn. He used transfer magic. Something black came out of the dragon, and Lurim's used her extract ability to suck it. She put the silverite extracted from the dragon safely into the bottle. The crystal dragon's dark discolorations were gone not even a minute later. Wraith checked for any remaining silverite inside the crystal dragon, and there were none. He informed the king that the crystal dragon had been fully cleansed of silverite, and the dragon had been completely healed. The dragon came alive once again and stood up, shocking him. The king thanked him. After that, they went to tell Seth about the news. He seemed relieved and happy. Wraith asked how things on his end were. He said that the attacker confessed after he put a little pressure on him, and Orda was going to live in the countryside for a while. Even though it didn't feel real, he was going to be taking over his family now. Seth then asked what he should do for his reward. Wraith asked if he could reserve some of the ingredients from the Linford family's supply. Seth was okay with them, but he wondered what he was planning to do with them. Wraith said that he wanted to open a shop. In the next scene, Wraith goes to Daisy's shop. Daisy asked why he was here for today, and he said that he could start coming back to help as usual from tomorrow onwards, and said that he had something to ask her. He said that he had been thinking of opening a shop, and he would like her to teach him what he needed to open one. Daisy's first reaction was to ask him if he was an idiot. She said that he was in for a rude awakening if he thought he could just open a shop without knowing anything. Not only there was the location and his budget to consider, but he didn't even know what to sell. She said that he wouldn't get far just selling potions and ingredients, and there were plenty of those kinds of shops around already. Wraith suggested magical devices, and this seemed more interesting than the other suggestions. The first thing he needed to open a shop was to get permission from the guild. She said that the kingdom wasn't some lawless land, and he already had the skills and achievements, so he would get approved quickly. After that, he needed to settle things like his material supply and his funding. But first, she told him to go and get his permit from the guild. If he was serious, she was willing to give him some advice after the permission. Wraith thanked her and then started looking around. He said that he was thinking of using the layout of her shop as a reference. Seeing her not reacting, Wraith continued wandering around the shop. Meanwhile, in the forest, a carriage was being carried by two monsters. There was a black-haired girl and an adventurer in there. The adventurer asked if she was okay. She said that it was her first time riding an earth dragon-pulled carriage. Ariel, an S-ranked adventurer, asked her out. Her name was Losha, and she refused him. Being rejected by a beautiful girl like her, he stated that he had another S-ranked adventurer that he was planning to meet, and this person appeared to be Laffy. In the next chapter, Wraith was at the guild and greeted Amelia. When she asked why he was here today, he said he wanted permission to open his shop. Amelia congratulated him and explained that they would need a few samples of his merchandise, and there was also a test that he needed to pass. The examiner Keel came, and they started the test with the samples of his merchandise. Amelia introduced Keel as the examiner for the test for those who want to start a business. They call it an exam, but it was more of a formality than anything, so there was nothing to worry about. Amelia excused herself to get the documents ready. Wraith was puzzled as to why she was getting the documents prepared because the exam was not over yet. Keel explained that Amelia had proclaimed that he would, without a doubt, clear the exam. He then mentioned that Wraith looked upon it very favorably. From what he saw of his samples, his merchandise was above the required standard, and he also would love for him to sell some to him. However, he said that they needed to confirm whether he truly was the person who made these, and whether he was able to produce those products at scale. He asked for a demonstration of the materials for him to use. Keel was sure that a top-quality potion like that would take at least a day to make even if he worked quickly, so he decided to wait here as long as it took for him to finish. However, not even 5 minutes passed and Wraith was done. Keel was shocked. When he confirmed that he made a top-quality potion, he tried to understand how he made something like that in just a few seconds. He started muttering about some things while Wraith was focusing on his exam. When Keel informed him that he passed the exam, Amelia came and praised how the potion was so beautiful. She said that she knew he would be able to pass and then handed him the documents. She then asked if Laffy was happy with her present. Wraith tried to play it cool and said that she did love it. Meanwhile, they were actually in some corner of his house. Amelia was thrilled that Laffy liked the present. Wraith's conscience was killing him, but he knew he could not tell the truth. He eventually managed to exit the guide without upsetting Amelia. Now it was time for the next step. There was a weird atmosphere at Seth's house. Seth was giving some materials to Wraith. He was acting like they were doing something suspicious here, but the ingredients were normal. Wraith wanted him to play along with him for a moment, but he wasn't that kind of guy. Seth asked if he could carry all that by himself, but Wraith was confident. He started putting them in his magic bag, and after everything was done, he excused himself. However, before he left the room, Leisha came slamming the door crying. She thought he was making some suspicious deals with a stranger. As the door was slammed right in his face, Wraith's nose was bleeding, but they gave him a napkin to stop the bleeding. Leisha apologized for jumping to conclusions, but Wraith took the blame because it was his fault for standing at the front door like that. Leisha objected and told him that she should have opened the door more gently. Seth decided to introduce Wraith to his sister again because he was sure she would see his face more often. She seemed like a lovely girl to Wraith. Wraith suddenly realized that this girl was the reason why Seth wanted to become a lord. This made him grin. Seth informed him that she would be here in his stead whenever he wasn't around, so he should remember her too. Now that he had the ingredients he came for, it was time for him to actually leave. Seth asked if he wanted a horse carriage for him, but he refused politely. At home, Lareems was whining to Wraith, but he was busy so he couldn't really feed her. He told her to help him sort out those ingredients. Lareems didn't want to work when she was starving. Wraith used his authority and told her that those who do not work can't eat, and if she wanted food, she had to work. She started working while sobbing, but Wraith couldn't care less about this now. He decided to work on the interior and exterior. He checked the place where he would have the detoxifiers and rings of magic strengthening. The interior was mostly done, so the only thing left was the exterior. He went outside and took a look at the house. It looked like a normal house. He did put out a sign, but wasn't enough. He also didn't want to decorate it too much. He noticed a tiny plant in the pot. Using his power to transform into a plant, he made it grow into a huge flower. Just that moment, Laffy and Sylvia came. When they learned he was changing the outside of the shop, Sylvia wanted to help him. Wraith said that he only has the decorating of the interior and exterior left. He asked if they could come up with the shop name. Laffy was puzzled because she thought he would use his own name. That didn't feel right to him. For now, he asked them to go inside instead of standing around and talking outside. He took out paper and ink and asked their opinions. Laffy suggested something simple like Alchemia. Wraith thought about it for a moment and it seemed like he liked this name. Laffy didn't expect him to be okay with that, but it was better to make a fast decision than to spend time agonizing over it. And he really thought it was a good name too. The next step was to decide on a logo. Laffy said that she couldn't draw, but he told her that it was fine. All they had to do was to look at the design and tell him what they thought. He had actually been thinking about it for some time already, even though he wasn't sure until recently whether or not he would actually be opening a shop. When he finished drawing the logo, they both seemed to like it. He seemed relieved that he completed this one too. Saliva didn't expect it to be this fast. Laffy asked if he had done all that without them, but he said that the two of them were here, and that he was able to finish quickly. Now he just has to make the shop's goods. Laffy took out a bento that she made for him and told him to do his best. Wraith got so excited to have a bento from Laffy that he said he would treasure it forever. He then created a bunch of potions, but he didn't stop. He needed to make more goods because he got a lot of ingredients from Seth. But he started to get hungry, so he decided to eat Laffy's handmade bento. However, Lareems came out of nowhere. He managed to eat some of it regardless of starving Lareems and get back to work right away. Any adventurer would want specialized rings of magic strengthening and impact resistance made by a Wraith who prides himself on having abnormal skills. There was no doubt that those would become signature products of this shop. He was also going to sell goods for everyday use that have been modified by Wraith to make them easier to use. He made these with the idea that they would be popular with housewives for lightening the burden of household chores. The last step was to put his logo on all those products. Wraith promised himself to do his best to make the shop successful. He placed the logos outside, and with that, Alchemia was open for business. It was still early in the morning, so there haven't been any customers yet, but he was sure it would get livelier in 1 to 2 hours. He had made good products, so there was no way they wouldn't sell. However, even after 3 days, the shop was still empty. Daisy was there and she asked why he was so gloomy like that. He had a mental breakdown and started crying about how he didn't get any customers. The next chapter starts with Daisy coming to see Wraith in his shop, and she asks him how his shop is doing. Wraith told her that he put out a sign, fixed up the interior, and even made a logo, but he hadn't gotten any customers, which drove him crazy. Daisy told him that just sitting still was not going to fix anything. She asked him if he had done anything other than he mentioned, like calling out to customers or using his name to promote the shop. Obviously, he didn't do anything to call out the customers. Daisy said she was surprised he had the gall to complain about having no customers like that. She said shops that sell potions were a dime a dozen in the capital, and a no-name shop that didn't offer anything special didn't stand a chance there. She reminded him that he was pretty famous, and told him that she didn't think he could get away with not using that to his advantage. He seemed like he understood the assignment. Wraith asked Daisy how it was for her when she first opened her shop. Daisy said she had people who knew her from the days she spent adventuring. She said they would have spread the word about her shop in the guild too, and she managed to grow her customer base that way. Wraith liked the idea of promoting his shop through social connections, and it was possible for him. However, Daisy said, even saying that the products in his shop were top quality, and she was sure word would get around even without asking a lot of people. She said it was just a question of doing your best to secure a few customers that would help spread the word. He said now he knew what to do, so he immediately set to work. Daisy told him to do his best, and she said Wraith didn't need it, but she would pray for his success. When Wraith was on his way, he thought about Daisy's advice and he thought he should ask someone good at spreading information. Meanwhile, a girl named Lotia approached him and asked him if he knew the way to the Adventurers Guild. Wraith thought she was cute, and then he showed her the way. She thanked her and went on her way. The animal on her head, which was a fox, spoke to her and told her that it was a good thing he knew the way, and now they just needed to buy the potions they needed, and they should be able to make some money. Lotia couldn't help looking at Wraith. The fox asked her if there was something about that young man that caught her eye because it was unusual for her to be interested in other people. Lotia said she thought that person was an alchemist. The fox said he was pretty young if that was the case. The fox thought Wraith was about her age, then he yawned. He said he thought she had things covered CC now and he was getting sleepy, so he would be taking a nap. He told Lotia to wake him up if anything happened, then fell asleep. Meanwhile, Lotia was trying to follow the road that Wraith told her, but she got lost. 1 week later, Wraith was at the Adventurers Guild and wondered if the girl he met back then managed to get into the guild. Came to think of it, the fox on that girl's head, as Wraith thought, had 3 tails. He thought if he had something like that for his shop's mascot, it would stand out a lot more. While he was thinking about that, Amelia called out to him, but he didn't hear her because of his thoughts. He apologized and told her that he was thinking about some stuff. Amelia told him he had a really serious look on his face and asked what he was thinking about. He said nothing much and giggled. He said he finally opened his shop, but it hadn't exactly been doing very well. Amelia thought it was surprising. Then Laffy approached them and said she thought his shop would be so busy he would have had trouble keeping up. Wraith said it looked like running a business wasn't as easy as it seemed. Laffy asked if he had any plans. He said he did have a few ideas from asking Daisy for advice, like how it would be nice to have a mascot character or a poster girl. However, he said he was still thinking about it. Laffy said she understood and it was really troubling him. Then Amelia came to the room and apologized to Wraith for keeping him waiting. She gave him some paper and told him to handle those very carefully. It was some important documents for his shop. He said he was done there, so he was leaving. He wished good luck to the 2 girls and they wished luck to his shop. Before Wraith couldn't leave the room, someone burst into the room. He screamed that Shine had returned. Everyone seemed shocked and was trying to understand what was going on. Some of them recognized the man and thought they hadn't seen him in a while. Wraith heard someone in the crowd say that he was one of the few S-ranked. Meanwhile, Laffy was trying to hide from him. Sylvia asked her what she was doing, but she just hushed her. Sylvia realized that she didn't think she had seen her make such a serious face even when they were on that volcano. Wraith tried to understand what was wrong. Even though Laffy tried to hide, the guy named Ariel who burst into the room saw her. Wraith asked if he was the S-ranked guy who slammed the door open. Ariel asked Laffy how long it had been and if she had been well. Laffy thought he was a jerk, but she just said that had been a while. Then Ariel asked her out on his knee. Laffy was shaking and told him that she had told him countless times that she wasn't interested. Also, Wraith was shocked that it happened countless times. Ariel told Laffy that he had confessed countless times, but he wouldn't give up for as long as she remained single. He said he would continue to confess as many times as it took. She was shocked and was trying to get rid of him, so she came up with an idea. Laffy looked at Wraith and told Ariel that actually she had someone. Ariel was shocked and asked her if he heard right and who he was. Meanwhile, Wraith was also shocked and thought that he would never know that Laffy had someone like that. Laffy just swiveled and went directly to Wraith and grabbed his arm, then told Ariel that he was the guy he had. Everyone seemed pretty shocked, and both guys were staring at each other. From his face, you could tell that Ariel was in doubt, so he turned to Laffy and told her that it wasn't good to lie. He had never seen her and Wraith together. Laffy was smiling almost painfully and told him that of course she could not walk around with him. She said she got to know him while he was out doing requests. As Ariel couldn't believe what Laffy said, he turned to Sylvia and asked if that was true. She told him that was true and they indeed met Wraith while he was absent. Sylvia said she didn't know if her sister and Wraith were really going out or not, but it was not like she was lying. Then Ariel turned to Wraith and asked him if Laffy was going out with him. Wraith was silent for a short while, and when he began to stutter, Laffy squeezed his arm tightly and Wraith was afraid his arm would break. Therefore, he said that it was true that they were going out. Ariel seemed disappointed and thought it could not be true that it happened in his absence. He found it unthinkable. He pointed to Wraith and screamed Laffy's name and told her not to believe him. He refused to believe it and he left the room. As soon as Laffy released Wraith's arm, he collapsed on the floor in pain. People started to gossip about them. After Ariel left, Laffy sat with Wraith and told him that she was sorry about that blonde guy. She said they had known each other for some time as fellow S-ranked adventurers. Ever since they met, she said he had been confessing to her every time, like Wraith just saw. She said she always turned him down, but it didn't seem like he had any intention of giving up. She continued, since it looked like nothing was going to change this way, she had no choice but to lie. Wraith reacquainted her and she decided to lie to Ariel about him being her boyfriend. She requested him to pretend to be her boyfriend until Ariel gave up on her. He smiled and said he had already told him as much, so he surely would play along until then if she was okay with him. Laffy again apologized to him and also thanked him and finally asked him if it was okay. Wraith told her that from his perspective as a guy, Ariel was pretty good looking, and she would make for a stunning S-ranked adventurer couple if she asked him. She admitted that he was not a bad guy, but his personality was not that good for her. Wraith asked what they were exactly supposed to do to show that they were a couple. Laffy blushed and told him timidly they could do something like going on dates. As soon as she told it, he also blushed. She added that of course it was just pretend dates, as Ariel still didn't believe they were going out, so they had to make sure not to slip up. Wraith found her right and decided to do their best. She again thanked Wraith sincerely. Meanwhile, Sylvia thought that she was sure he would help her in her time of need too. Wraith had embarked on his journey after a conversation with Laffy, during which they struck an agreement. The recent incident of pretending to be a lover lingered vividly in his thoughts, occupying his mind as he walked. As he continued on his path, he suddenly noticed a girl lying motionless on the ground. Realizing that she had collapsed, he quickly shifted his focus to her, concerned for her well-being. He gently held the girl and asked if she was okay, his voice filled with concern. As he cradled her and looked closely at her face, a flicker of recognition crossed his mind. He remembered who she was. Relief washed over him when he noticed the rise and fall of her chest, confirming that she was at least breathing. Despite the immediate worry, her familiar features reassured him as he continued to check for signs of consciousness. Meanwhile, the fox approached Wraith and Wraith asked him who he was. He said he was a friend of Lotia and requested him to help her. Wraith was shocked that the fox just talked. The girl seemed to be trying to say something. Wraith immediately approached her and asked if she was okay. She was trying to ask for help. Her stomach was growling and she said she was hungry. Wraith went and got bread for her. The fox told him that they were tricked out of all their money so they couldn't get anything to eat. Wraith could relate to that. After she ate the bread, Wraith asked her who exactly she was. She said she was Lotia, and the fox said his name was Mimi, and he was a spirit. Wraith said it was pretty unusual for a spirit and a human to be together. Mimi said he had been with her for a long time. He said she was like a daughter to him. Wraith thought taking a human as his daughter was interesting. Wraith asked them what they were going to do after that. Lotia said she was looking for an alchemist by the name of Wraith. Wraith seemed surprised. Wraith was shocked when she said that she was looking for someone named Wraith. He said that he was Wraith and asked why she was looking for him. She told him that she wanted to become his disciple. Wraith froze at first, but then he expressed his shock in a very loud way. He asked what she meant by that, and she said that there had been rumors of him going around that he was an amazing alchemist who could make elixirs, although she didn't expect him to be this young. Wraith was surprised that it had even reached other countries. He was in a dilemma because although he didn't have time for a disciple between his shop and his promise to Laffy, he didn't think he could just refuse her like that. With red cheeks, Lotia repeated that she wanted him to teach her alchemy. Wraith had an idea, and he told her that he would let her be his disciple, but on two conditions. First, he asked her to work as an employee in his shop, and in exchange, he would teach her alchemy. She could also quit anytime she liked. If Lotia becomes his employee, he wouldn't have to leave his shop just to teach her. Lotia accepted the first condition. His second condition was to make that spirit become his shop's mascot. The spirit asked what a mascot does, and he responded that they just need to be in the shop, and occasionally customers might talk to him or try to pet him. Spirit seemed confused because he wouldn't let humans do such things to him. As he expected, spirits have their sense of pride, but having a talking fox spirit as a mascot would make his shop stand out. Lotia looked at the fox and asked him once again with hope in her eyes. Seeing her face, the spirit couldn't resist her and accepted the conditions. Wraith then asked how long she would be staying in the capital, and she said she hadn't decided yet. Wraith offered her to stay in his shop until she had her living arrangements settled. Back at home, Lurims was taken aback when she saw Wraith with a girl she didn't know. He told her to keep it down and informed her that she was going to be working here from now on. Lotia asked who that woman was while they were climbing the stairs. He responded that she was his mentor and she lived here too. He showed her her room and then wanted to see how good she was as an alchemist. He took out a black crystal. It was a magic device that could measure an alchemist's degree of competence through the basic process of sublimation. Lotia knew about this decision because it was from her country. She touched the crystal and it started sparkling. Even for a practiced alchemist, getting the crystal 70% clear was considered a good result, but Lotia managed to get it to 90%. Wraith decided to try it himself because he had never tried to measure his power before. However, when he touched the crystal, it shone so much that he fell to the ground screaming. Lotia asked if he was okay, and he was. He wondered why it broke, and Lotia explained that it might be because he exceeded its capacity. That was her first time seeing it break. She wanted to see him make a magical device. Wraith was surprised because he thought she would want to see potions. Lotia explained that she does make potions, but she mainly makes magical devices. He asked what kind of magical device he should make, and she left that to him. Since it was summer, he decided to make a device for keeping himself cool. He was going to use a cryite, a large sheet of paper, a pen, and a necklace. He added the cryite powder in a pen. It was a pen that could append the effects of the material you put inside it. When making magical devices, he explained that he normally has to trace the magic circle using the materials he needs, but with this pen, he could skip that step entirely. He drew the magic circle on the paper, and when he put the necklace on it, it was done. She didn't seem so impressed, so Wraith asked what she needed. She wanted a ring from him. As he was giving a ring to the girl, Lurims saw them and misunderstood everything. She started freaking out that he was in a relationship, but when Wraith asked if that looked like that kind of atmosphere, she figured that he wasn't brave enough for that sort of thing. Lurims then asked what they were doing. Wraith responded that he was getting Lotia to show him her alchemy. They introduced themselves, and Wraith mentioned to Lurims that Lotia would be living with them on the second floor from today onwards. He then told Lotia to continue. She whispered the ring append and started using magic. Wraith was surprised that she was using magic. She said that she often made magical devices infused with attack-type magic since she was good at magic too. Lurimis thought Lotia came here to learn magic, but Wraith responded that she didn't come here to learn magic. Lurims was puzzled because Wraith made magical devices differently from how she did. Lotia interrupted them and stated that she wanted him to teach her about magic circles. Wraith asked if she was sure because it was really tedious and there were plenty of other things he could teach her besides magic circles. However, Lotia promised to do her best. At dinner, Wraith wondered what spirits eat. The fox responded that unlike feeble humans, spirits do not need to consume food. Lurims added that spirits live off magical energy instead of food. When they run out of magical energy, they lose their memories and are reborn as a spirit again. She then wondered where Lotia came from. She said that she comes from a place called Wano Country. Wraith haven't heard it before, but Lurimis has been there once. She said that the alcohol and snacks there were luxurious and had a mysterious taste. It was a pretty different place from here. She said that you could even see it in the way the buildings were constructed. It was also a place with customs that placed a strong emphasis on politeness. Wraith seemed pretty interested in her hometown. Lurims noticed that Lotia was pretty young and asked if she had always been learning alchemy. She responded that she studied magic, and her real interest was in alchemy, but her parents sent her to a school for magic training. Lurims asked if she was nobility, considering that most of the people who went to school were nobles. She didn't seem like she was going to answer that question, so Wraith changed the subject and asked how Mimi, her spirit fox, came to be with her. Mimi responded that there were reasons for that. Simply put, he explained that Lotia made a contract with him when she was a child. Lurims seemed surprised. When making a contract with a spirit, the spirit takes magical energy in exchange for allowing the contractor to borrow their power. Just borrowing a spirit's power grants the contractor access to power orders of magnitude greater than normal magic. Wraith smiled and stated that starting from tomorrow, Lotia would be working as an employee here, so he was sure she would be a big help to them. Lurim smirked once again and teased Wraith, asking him if he thought she was cute. Wraith tried to change the subject by suggesting making some flyers while they were at it. Lurims agreed for the first time. The next day, they opened their shop in the morning. Wraith didn't seem to be so happy. Even though they had a mascot now, he tried to be optimistic and said that this was expected for the first day. The bell rang and their first customer, Laffy and Sylvia, came. They greeted him and asked how the shop was going. He welcomed them and then she noticed Lotia. She asked who she was and Wraith introduced him. Sylvia went crazy over Mimi and asked what that tiny creature was. Wraith told her that he was Lotia's contracted spirit, Mimi. Hearing that he was a contracted spirit made her a little nervous. Wraith comforted her and told her to go ahead and pet it if she wanted. The two of them were their guests after all. While Sylvia was petting Mimi, Wraith asked Laffy if she came to talk about something. Laffy seemed a little embarrassed and tried to say that she came to talk about the pretend lovers thing, the one where he pretends to be in a relationship with her. Wraith did remember that. Laffy asked if he had a day free with the least volume she could use, but fortunately Wraith heard her and thought about his schedule. As he was thinking, Laffy pulled it together and asked him if he would like to go on a date with her. This was the last thing Wraith expected from her, and he almost had a heart attack when he heard her. The next chapter begins with an adventurer named Rick dozing off while examining a small potion. His partner informed him that they were almost at the location of their request, and asked what he had been doing this whole time. Rick responded that he had been wondering about this potion he bought from a shop he hadn't heard of. He was having difficulty believing it would actually do what it says. She was surprised to see him buy such a thing, and was even more shocked when he said it was a physical ability enhancement potion. Rick also found it surprising, but his gut told him that the shopkeeper wasn't lying. He drank the potion and decided to test how well it worked against a giant poison spider. When the spider spit its poison on him, he made a small hop to get out of the way but wasn't expecting this much height. He wondered if it was the potion effect and decided to test if it was true. He easily slashed the spider's 2 legs and landed on the ground. It was confirmed that his speed, dexterity, and maneuverability were all completely different now. Seeing how amazing the potion was, he gained courage and defeated the spider without his partner's help. He watched him kill the monster as if it were nothing, and the first thing she asked was who the hell made that potion. In the shop Alchemia, Wraith checked the potion stocks and put the new items in an eye-catching spot. Seeing everything in order, he was pleased. It was almost time to open the shop. While gripping the door, he told Lotia that there probably wouldn't be many customers today either, but they still should do their best. Lotia agreed and he slowly opened the door but was shocked when he saw tons of people waiting for them to open. He couldn't believe his eyes and wondered what was going on. He thought this was a dream, and when he opened the door, everything would be back to normal. But when he did, he was crushed by those people. The customers bought so many items that shelves were empty even before closing time. In the empty store, Wraith and Lotia were trying to understand what just happened while trying to catch their breath. Another customer came and asked if they were sold out. Wraith explained that a large group of customers had just come and now they were all sold out. He then asked if she knew why there were so many customers. The woman was surprised that he hadn't heard about it and explained that these past few days, the word had been going around of a shop that sells amazing potions and magical devices. Items with flame marks on them were really reliable. While Wraith was trying to process what he just heard, the woman asked if he would take orders. He said he did and received the woman's orders and greeted her. Wraith didn't think that the logo he created would work this well at promoting the shop and felt really happy. He immediately decided to make more merchandise when they still had lots of materials. When the shop was closed, Lotia and Mimi were exhausted. Wraith praised their good work today and mentioned that they might be just as busy tomorrow. They seemed sick of this duty, but Wraith reminded her of the promise she made. Pouting, she said that she would do her best. Today, Wraith also had a date with Laffy. Even though the objective was to chase Ariel, it still made him nervous to be acting as her boyfriend. Laffy arrived at their meeting destination and Wraith blushed when he saw her. She apologized for keeping him waiting. She was as shy as Wraith was. Seeing her shy self, Wraith was so impressed by Laffy. He asked if she chose those clothes and Laffy responded that Sylvia did. Meanwhile, Ariel was watching them from a distance. While they were walking, Wraith was thinking about what people normally do on a date. Laffy mentioned how well his shop was doing, and he was surprised that she knew about that. She said that the adventurers had been raving about those potions with the flame mark and also a 3-tailed fox. He realized that it was just like that customer said. Word of his shop was spreading through word of mouth. That was the method Daisy mentioned when he went to her for advice. Lotia and Mimi were part of the reason too. Those two were popular with all the customers, regardless of age or gender. He really hoped things would keep going this way. Raffi giggled and stated that she didn't think things would die down that easily for him because after all of his products were far from normal. Embarrassed, Wraith thanked her. But if that's so, he really wished Lotia would be okay. She left her to look after the shop by herself today. Suddenly, they heard a loud crying voice and a kid was sobbing. He wanted to help her immediately, but Laffy stopped him. After a few seconds, Ariel appeared and gave the kid a flower, saying that crying didn't suit her pretty face. But his polite attitude didn't make any difference in how she felt, and she kept crying. Wraith wondered why he dressed so weirdly, and Laffy figured that he must have been tailing them. Guards came and took Ariel. Laffy wanted to get out of here while they could. Wraith wasn't sure because it looked like he had no intention of giving up on her. She said that she had an idea about that. She showed him a festival that happens every year in the capital, and it was really amazing with the shops that showed up at the parade. She said that Sylvia had been bugging her about going to the festival with him, just the two of them. Considering that Ariel would probably continue to watch them, they might be able to dispel his doubts if he sees them together at the festival. He responded that festivals were a staple as far as dates go, and he was fine with it. Laffy was also fine with it if he was too, and then it was settled. After an awkward silence, Wraith remembered that since Ariel himself was taken away, that would make continuing this date pointless, so they ended their date. 1 week later, Lotia asked Wraith if he was really going. He said that it was already noon, so the number of customers should be a lot more manageable now. She was still uneasy about doing it herself, but Wraith said it would be fine and praised her. On their last date, Wraith wasn't able to take the lead at all, and as the guy, that was pretty pathetic. For this festival date, he wanted to do what he could to make it a success, and just for that purpose, he wanted to get some help and went to Daisy. He apologized for coming so suddenly and said he really needed her help, but then saw Sylvia sitting there. He stuttered while asking why she was there. She smirked and asked what he thought she was. Daisy responded that she wanted her help with something, but she didn't know what yet. Wraith had an idea about that. Sylvia said he had promised to go to the festival with her sister, but unfortunately, he wasn't familiar with the capital's festival, and at this rate he wouldn't be able to take the lead with her and create a good atmosphere. And that was where Sylvia came in. She was thinking they could offer him support for his date. As he didn't seem so happy about it, she asked if he thought he could do it on his own, but she didn't know that was the reason he came to ask Daisy for help. Daisy understood what they wanted, but was still puzzled as to why they chose her. Sylvia responded that Wraith didn't know a lot of people. To start with, Daisy wanted to confirm if he was dating an S-ranked adventurer. Wraith corrected her that he was pretending to go out with her to help her shake off a guy who likes her. She seemed confused about the situation. Sylvia mentioned that if she couldn't do it, she could go to Amelia next. Wraith didn't want to do that at all, as he knew how she would react. Daisy didn't see any reason not to want her because she was an adult, but Wraith begged her to help him. She started to wonder why he was so desperate for her to help. He eagerly stated that it was a matter of life and death for him. She decided to help him after this insistent behavior. Sylvia enthusiastically suggested beginning the preparations for the festival, but Daisy was still working, so they waited until later. Everything began when the country was founded 300 years ago. Wishing for the kingdom to prosper, the Royal Dragon Festival was born as a celebration to be offered to the Crystal Dragon. Year after year, the scale of the event grew, to the point where today the entire royal capital partakes in the festivities. Everyone who lives in the capital knows about it and looks forward to it every summer. Wraith was totally amazed by the festival. Laffy asked if he was enjoying his first ever Royal Dragon Festival, and he responded that everything he had seen so far had been amazing. He could see why so many people look forward to it every year. When he glanced at Laffy and her beautiful outfit, he couldn't help but say it out loud. Thankfully, Laffy didn't hear him say that. As they expected, Ariel was still watching them. Wraith started looking around to see the others, but couldn't because Sylvia and the other girls were hiding. Nicola seemed so excited to be with Daisy and Sylvia at the same time, while Daisy seemed sick of it already. Lurims mentioned that Wraith didn't have much experience with the opposite sex, so getting him to act like a proper boyfriend was a pretty tall order. She then noticed Ariel and asked if he was okay. Sylvia responded that she didn't need to worry about him, and then noticed that Wraith bought something for Laffy. He bought candied apples for her, and when they made physical contact, they both startled with red faces. Lurims and Sylvia seemed so happy to see their interactions. On the other hand, Nicola was trying to get a date with Daisy. She immediately refused her, but Nicola found her firm attitude even more cute. While Daisy was trying to get rid of her, Sylvia and Lurims were trying to find a way to make Wraith and Laffy progress a little. A bunch of men appeared and started hitting on them. Sylvia responded with a very intimidating face. They got goosebumps from her face. One of them said they just wanted to have fun, and it was their first time here in the capital. Lurimis slid in and stated that they weren't familiar with the area either, so they should ask someone else. But they didn't give up and offered to walk around all together. One of them grabbed Daisy's shoulder, saying that they could join too. Saliva's threatening voice was heard, ordering him to get his hands off her, and his hand froze there in a second. While the girls were taking care of Daisy, Sylvia glared at them. They said they just wanted to have fun, but she showed her serious side and told them to leave. She was just trying to help her sister and Wraith here, so she didn't have time to fool around with some random strangers. She wondered how she should create an accident for them and freeze their legs. She told them to wait just a moment because she had a small request for them. Back to the festival date, Wraith and Laffy were eating street meat. Wraith noticed shops from all over and Laffy asked if they should get some unusual creatures as souvenirs. He remembered Lotia saying that she would be joining the festival, so she was probably walking around and trying out the food nearby. As for Lurims, he just hoped she was just at home drinking. Suddenly, the guys that hit Sylvia and Lurims appeared and started to hit Laffy. Wraith didn't think they were hitting on her because they seemed scared and kept looking at something behind them. While he was trying to figure out what was going on, Laffy responded that there was no way she would come with them. Seeing the same look that Sylvia gave them, they got scared and ran away immediately. They both seemed pretty confused as to what just happened. Seeing her plan didn't work at all, Sylvia collapsed on the ground. Lurims was clueless and praised Laffy for being brave. Sylvia was really hoping that it would create a good atmosphere for Wraith to protect Laffy from a group of thugs. As expected of her, Laffy was a tough one. She stood up and decided to target Wraith directly. She wanted to make sure her sister grasps happiness right here and now. She told Lurims that they must close the distance between Wraith and Laffy through more physical means. That sounded good, and Lurims wondered what they had in mind. She planned to direct wind magic towards Wraith to make him move closer to Laffy, just enough that they don't get caught. Now that they settled the plan, they combined their power and created a strong wind to make him get closer to Laffy. Wraith lost his balance and found his face thrusting against Laffy's breasts. He immediately pulled himself together and started apologizing in panic. Sylvia and Lurims were thrilled because this was exactly what they wanted to do. Laffy and Wraith noticed a game stall and went to check it out, but Wraith was pretty nervous to play the ring-tossing game. He thought he missed it, but the ring went into the stick in the last second. He tried one more time and got it every single time. The people started to gather around him, but he was just confused because he had no idea how he could succeed. The truth was obvious. Sylvia and Lurims were the ones who helped him. Seeing how crowded it was getting, Lurims commented that they might have overdone it a little. Sylvia agreed and mentioned that his sister was going into work mode. It looked like that was all they could do, so Lurims suggested enjoying the festival themselves. After the game, they were having fireworks, so Wraith suggested finding somewhere for them to sit down. He suddenly saw Amelia walking and wanted to avoid her, so he said he was going to buy them some drinks, but it was too late. While grinning, Amelia asked where Sylvia was and assumed they were at the festival by themselves. Laffy tried to explain it by reminding her of the thing with Ariel. Amelia knew about that, but she still commented on how friendly they were with each other. She also mentioned that this was a place where a lot of couples gather. While she was talking, Wraith noticed the fog and looked at his hand. Suddenly, his ring of magic nullification cracked, which means that this was a magic fog. Suddenly, Amelia fainted on the ground, confusing them both. Wraith analyzed her and confirmed that she was okay. It looked like she was just sleeping. Laffy was glad that she was okay, but was confused as to what was going on. Wraith explained that this might be a fog imbued with magic that puts people to sleep. He was okay because he had his ring of magic nullification. He asked how she was feeling and she said that she was fine. She assumed it might be that the effect takes a different amount of time for each person, and they have to do something while they can still move. This fog covered quite a large area, so the mage behind this must be pretty powerful. He wondered how many people in the capital were still conscious. Laffy suggested looking for other people who were still conscious. They didn't know when this fog would go away, so they were going to check other areas for now. The fog was thickening, and at worst, they might be up against someone who could rival even Mentor. Somebody had to do something for sure. Wraith would have taken being teased by Amelia over this. While they were walking, they noticed that people were all sleeping. Laffy sensed something and asked who was there. It was Ariel, and he greeted them. Laffy asked if he knew anything about what was going on, and he responded that he didn't. But he guessed that everyone who was still awake right now had a certain level of resistance against magic. That S-ranked adventurers like him and Laffy were still awake was proof of that. Lurims and Sylvia put Daisy and Nicola in a safe place and started looking for Wraith and Laffy. Lurims was trying to search for his magic, but it seemed that her magic was being blocked. It was also hard for Sylvia to sense her sister's magic too. Lurims sensed two sources of magic other than Wraith. One was Laffy's, and there was one more. Sylvia figured that it was probably Ariel, as he was an S-ranked adventurer too. Lurims remembered him as the adventurer who was in love with Laffy. She then asked if her magic was holding up in this fog, and Sylvia said she was fine. Lurims decided to fly over there as long as her magic was up to it. After a while, they found Wraith and the others. Wraith was shocked to see them in the air like that. The first thing he asked was if she was drunk. Suddenly, they heard someone and were immediately ready to attack. But it was Mimi, calling them weak. Wraith asked why she was there and where was Lotia. Mimi decided to start from the end and simply explained that this fog was created by Lotia. Wraith was confused when Mimi said it was Lotia, but not the Lotia he knew. Wraith wanted to confirm if it wasn't the expressionless Lotia who finds things bothersome and doesn't talk a lot. Mimi explained that the Lotia he knew was the light Lotia. However, the one using this magic was the dark Lotia, who revealed that Lotia was a half-human, half-vampire hybrid. Vampires were a magical race that existed over 1,000 years ago. Coined to the rulers of the night, they were known for sucking blood. They once reigned supreme with the power granted to them by their excellent physical abilities. However, they had difficulties reproducing, and their numbers eventually dwindled until they became relegated to history. Mimi stated that Lotia has yet to gain full control of her power, and when she lacks blood or gets drunk, her personality changes and she goes berserk. Mimi explained that right now, she was in her dark vampire mode and she was using her power to envelop the royal capital in fog. Wraith asked when that mode end would, and it could be anywhere from half a day to more than 1 day. Even if she was a hybrid, she was still a vampire. Her power was now far beyond a normal human's, and since she was her contracted spirit, she could not do anything to stop her. Wraith wondered what made her go berserk in the first place, and she responded that she just drank some alcohol, and Mimi was the one who made her drink. Wraith asked Lurims if she had any idea, and she said that they didn't need a plan, and they just had to stop Lotia. Sylvia was also worried about if anyone got injured too, but Ariel stepped in and told them to leave that to him. He winked and said it would be more efficient for him with his potions. Now that everyone had made up their minds, Mimi told them to follow her and started running. Lurimis told Wraith to give her his hand as it would be faster by air, and Sylvia took Laffy. After a rough journey, they finally landed. Wraith saw his life flash before his eyes and felt really sick, as he wasn't used to flying around like that. They then noticed dark Lotia in the air. She seemed pleased that 4 delicious-looking morsels were showing up at her feet. Seeing her smile, Wraith was sure that was not the usual Lotia, but it looked like they might be able to talk to her. Mimi told them to be careful because she doesn't hold back. Lotia said there was no need to be cautious. Lurimis politely asked Lotia to dispel this fog magic for them. She told her that she was being a bad girl and causing trouble for the whole capital. Lotia's attitude changed, and she said that she didn't want to. She also called Lurim's old lady, which was a trigger for her. Wraith stopped and asked Lotia what was her goal in doing all this. Lotia responded that she didn't have any, and she just wanted to enjoy herself a little since it had been so long since she had been free. She suddenly spawned right in front of Wraith and asked him to join her. Wraith was frozen by how quick she was. Before she could bite him, Lurims kicked Lotia, but she managed to dodge her. She laughed and said she wouldn't catch her with something like that. But turning her back to Lurims was a mistake. She sent her sharp ice and captured her. Wraith was still in shock and wondered if she teleported to do that. He suddenly realized something and immediately informed Lurims that she needed to bind her as fast as possible. But Lotia smirked and disappeared. She told them that this level of magic wouldn't work on her and started flying around them. Wraith figured that she was moving around by turning herself into fog. Sylvia tried to attack her with chains, but Lotia easily escaped from them too. But then Lotia noticed that she wasn't trying to hit her and wondered what she was aiming for. She suddenly found herself in the middle of thousands of chains, and Sylvia explained that she wasn't trying to hit her and she was aiming to contain her from the start. Inside the chain ball, Lotia figured that she used chains to restrict her movement and formed a ball to make sure she couldn't escape. She realized that she had underestimated her smartness, but Lotia had enough power to burn every single chain that created the ball and saved herself. The next one was Laffy, but the moment she touched her, she turned her arm into the fog and made her fall to the ground. While Laffy was apologizing for not being able to get her, Wraith was questioning how she could jump like that in a yukata. Laffy informed Wraith that they might not be able to stop her without hurting her. Wraith didn't want to do that and said there must be a way, but Lurims reminded him that Lotia was the source of this fog magic, and she was having no problem holding them back right now. If they don't get serious now, things could get worse. They started attacking her simultaneously, and Lotia counterattacked them. While they were battling, Wraith asked Mimi if there was any good way to settle this. Mimi told him that vampires as a race have several weaknesses. Sunlight, crosses, flowing water, fire, and holy water were the examples. They couldn't use sunlight because it was nighttime right now, but Lurims and the others were blasting at her with flowing water and fire right now. Mimi stated that water and fire conjured magic doesn't work on her and it needs to come from nature, which leaves them with holy water. He only had one bottle with him, but if they could hit her with this bottle, they might stop her. Right at that moment, Lotia appeared right behind him and took the bottle. Laffy kicked her and asked if he was okay. Wraith told her that she stole the holy water. Lotia opened the bottle and emptied it. She told him that being all sneaky by himself down there made him stand out even more. She started mocking him and insulting him while laughing. Wraith started shaking but did not react to her insults. He explained to the girls that he wasn't mad, but he just thought of a great way to make her cry with an evil face. As the girls were concerned about the plan, he explained that they wouldn't have to hurt her, but he would need help from the 3 of them. Lurims was against it if they needed to do something terrible to her, but Wraith said it would be fine. Sylvia asked what he wanted them to help. He asked them to come closer and started whispering the plan while Losha was giving them a puzzled look. He told them that they needed to draw her to the open area near South Gate, and if possible, they should make sure she wouldn't be able to escape. That was a pretty difficult request. Wraith told them to just do that and he would be able to do the rest. While they were whispering, Lurims made a sudden attack, but Lotia dodged it with ease. Losha once again called her old lady, which made her even more annoyed. Suddenly, Lurims created lots of balls of water and started blasting them to Losha. While she was getting distracted by the balls, Sylvia's chains came right in front of her face. Sylvia dared her to dodge everything if she didn't want to get hurt and ruin her pretty face. Losha realized that they were holding back this whole time. But she was having so much fun now, and wanted them to give everything they had while running away from them. They made her run towards the area that Wraith was talking about, and there was a water fountain there. But Losha noticed what they were after and stopped. Wraith told everyone to move exactly as he told them, and he would take responsibility for whatever happened. Losha was thinking about who would come to her first. She thought about Lurims and Sylvia, but to everyone's surprise, it was Wraith who made the first attack. Losha was confused because he couldn't fight or even use magic. She decided to keep her distance for now, even though she doubted he would be able to do much. Wraith used her compression power to break the fountain. Losha realized that this didn't look good and fled away, but Laffy was after her. When Laffy was about to grab her, she turned into fog again. But then Lurims and Sylvia appeared right behind her. Wraith told Lurims to make some walls to enclose this area and didn't care how she could do it. Lurims was pleased with this request as she was great at magic. Wraith wasn't trying to make her fall into the fountain because it was a lot faster to just bring the fountain to her. Once again, he used the compressed power and made the fountain explode. The explosion created a small rain and Losha slowly lost consciousness. As she was falling from the sky, Laffy caught her before she collapsed to the ground. Wraith asked them if they were okay, and then he was shocked to see Laffy and Losha drenched. Laffy asked what was wrong and he could only say their clothes. They scolded him for staring at their body. Wraith then noticed that Lurims and Sylvia weren't wet. Lurims used her wind magic and dried them. Losha opened her eyes and commented on how he really did a number on her, and it made her smile to think she would have the rug pulled out under her by someone who couldn't even use magic. Wraith was glad he was able to surprise her. Now that he thought about it, Dark Lochia really ran her mouth back there, and they went through a lot because of that. Now that was over, it was time for her punishment. Wraith and Lurims started chasing her. Wraith caught her and spanked her back a few times while Losha was promising to never do that again. After the punishment was over, Lurims mentioned how Wraith overdone it a bit. But what was done, so they shouldn't linger on in the past. He then asked Lotia how much of that she remembered. He was surprised to hear that she remembered all of it. She genuinely apologized for everything and seemed really sorry about it. Mimi congratulated everyone but still mentioned that she expected them to do it faster, as there were 4 of them against 1 of her. Wraith was getting used to her insults. Now that Lotia was back to normal and the fog was clearing, people started to wake up. It felt like it was all a dream to Wraith. While he was dozing off, Ariel came and informed him that he managed to make sure everyone was safe too. They thanked him and he said that he had been investigating whether he and Laffy had been going out. Wraith totally forgot that the reason they came here was because of him. He asked what the result of his investigation was, and he said that they seemed to be actually dating. Laffy and Wraith acted like they had no idea he was investigating them. Wraith had his doubts, but this meant that they had accomplished their initial objective. But he did not expect Errol to say that when his love for Laffy wanes, he would be there to proclaim his love once more. Until then, he told him to do his best to make Laffy a happy woman and vanished. 1 week later, Wraith seemed down a little. Laffy asked him how long he was going to stay like that. Lotia was also the same. Seth was also there and told him to accept it already. Destruction of the fountain and public roads, and on top of that, disturbance caused by the city-wide use of magic, and Lotia's obstruction of festival activities and hostile use of magic threatening the royal capital crimes usually land them in prison. Wraith knew that, but the price was still too much for them. Losha, in a gloomy mood, mentioned that they were broke. To cheer them up, Sylvia said they would help out too. Wraith had to turn her down because this was between him and Lotia. There was no helping it. He was going to pay for everything. Losha tried to stop him, but he told her that she was not in any place to complain when she collapsed penniless on the side of the road. But after seeing her face, he mentioned that it wouldn't be free, and he would make sure she worked hard in his shop to make up for it. She seemed okay with that and thanked him. He reminded her that it might have turned out differently if she had told them about all this from the start. She apologized for that and explained that a lot of non-human races weren't looked upon kindly, such as being refused service in shops or getting rocks thrown at them, which made her unable to say that she was a vampire. Wraith smiled and told her that it was okay, and the people in the capital were nice. He then told Laffy that some alchemists helped out people who collapsed on the roadside, and there were even female S-ranked adventurers. Laffy confirmed him, and added that they used to be discriminated against. But now the number of non-human female adventurers has been increasing. She once again welcomed Lochia to the royal capital. The real problem was what they were going to do now. It was going to be tough for him to earn enough just from the shop. Seth gave him a paper and asked what he was thinking about. He explained that the Royal Magic Academy was recruiting temporary teachers. It was an application paper. Wills Redium was the chairman of the school. Seth was surprised that he knew about him and wondered what kind of connections he had. Wraith responded that it wasn't a connection that he made on purpose. Seth asked what he was going to do about the alchemy teacher job. The salary was pretty good, and even temporary teachers could be assistant teachers, so he could do it while running his shop. He mentioned that his sister Leisha was there too. He assumed it would be easy for him since he already knew 2 people there. Wraith didn't think there was any way he could do this because he didn't have any experience as a teacher. He couldn't imagine himself talking to a whole group of students. Lurims pushed him a little, but it was easy for her to say, as she didn't even know how he felt about it. Lurims had full trust in him. Wraith felt like the students wouldn't listen to him because he was pretty close to their age. Sylvia said she would love to go to a class where Wraith was the teacher. He started to consider accepting the job, but if he ran into trouble, he would ask Seth's sister for help. Seth laughed and mentioned that she was younger than him. That was not a problem for Wraith. Even if she was younger, she definitely had it together better than him. Seth left there to start preparing. After teasing Wraith a bit, they continued working at the shop. A few months later, Wraith and Seth arrived at the Royal Academy for Wraith's meeting with the Wills. He asked where the students and Seth were and explained that it was their summer break now. When they arrived at the door, Wraith once again asked if he really had to meet him. But Seth told him that he was going to work here, so of course he had to meet Will. They knocked on the door and entered Will's room. Wills greeted Wraith with politeness. While giving each other fake smiles, Wills mentioned how he had heard a lot about him since the last time they met. He then asked what the reason was he decided to come to their academy. Seeing Wraith's nervous face, Wills thought he had gone too far and apologized. Wraith wondered if he knew about destroying that fountain. Wills stated that whatever his reason, they would be more than happy to welcome an alchemist of his caliber here. He asked if he had taken a look at the documents they passed him earlier, and Wraith confirmed him. As mentioned in the documents, he would be an assistant teacher in their academy classes. Putting aside the question of his term of employment for now, they would also like him to follow the instructions of the teacher in charge of the class until the test. If he would like to chime in on anything he sees during the classes, he was free to contribute as he saw fit. Wraith asked who exactly he would be assisting. The name of the teacher in question was Helga. Hearing his name, Seth seemed a bit nervous. Wills remembered that Helga was Seth's teacher during his time here. Wraith asked what kind of person Helga was. Wills stated that he was an excellent teacher. But Wraith wasn't asking about his capabilities as a teacher. He wanted to know about him as a person. It was obvious that he didn't get along with Wills. Wills signed some papers and told him that they could go ahead and meet him to see what he was like in person. He was sure he would have specific instructions about what he wanted from him in the class too. Wraith was surprised, so Wills kind of teased him. He said that he looked forward to working with him and let them excuse themselves. In the hall, Wraith let out a big breath and said he didn't want to talk to Wills for the next few years. Seth thought he was exaggerating, but he said that it would be so much better if he could stop smiling all the time like that, and wanted Seth to tell him that next time. He then wondered what kind of person he was. Seth stated that he wasn't a bad person or anything, but also couldn't really define his personality. He just said he would know what he meant right away once he met him. He then pushed him to Helga's room. Wraith was shocked when he entered a beautiful room full of books. The room was at least a few times bigger than his workshop. He assumed that he must be a lot more organized than he thought to be able to manage all of this. Seth asked what kind of person he was imagining, and as Lurims was the only teacher he met closely, he thought Helga would be a mess like her. Seth found it strange that he wasn't in his room because he was always in there when he was his student. Wraith started looking around the room, assuming that there was no one there. Seth suggested waiting for a while. Wraith noticed something on a box. At first glance, it looked like a stone, but it felt like it might be a magic gem. He wanted to take a closer look, but then heard a grumpy yelling asking who was there. A bearded old man came and told them that this place was his research room and he wouldn't have them doing as they pleased. Seth greeted Helga and he recognized Seth. Seth was pleased that he remembered him, and Helga mentioned that he was a particularly bright student. He was the opposite of what Wraith imagined and was confused by Seth's reaction earlier. Suddenly, Helga started wandering around Wraith, staring at him. He found Wraith very young, as they said. He mentioned that he had heard about him and even knew his name. Apparently, he had a personal interest in him as well. He had made quite a name for himself since appearing in the capital out of nowhere. He found him capable enough at his age to create elixirs and have even saved adventurers with them. To him, those were all his most famous exploits. It was also said that he was very closely acquainted with Lurims. Wraith was shocked that the public knew so much about him. When he was about to think this as a good sign, Helga told him that until he had confirmed his ability with his own 2 eyes, he would not acknowledge him and could not have him becoming overconfident either. Wraith confirmed that he was really strict. He glanced at Seth, who was giving him fake smiles. Seeing him standing there, Helga once again scolded him for dawdling and ordered him to get over here. While following what he said, Wraith wondered if he would be okay working here. He then whispered to Seth, asking why they had to move if they were going to talk about the job. He wondered if he had done something wrong and thought he was angry because they barged into his room without asking. Seth stated that that wouldn't be a problem. Knowing Helga's personality, he bet it was because he wasn't satisfied with him being around the same age as the students. Wraith was flabbergasted because his age was one of the few things that he could not do anything about. Seth giggled and said he wasn't a bad person, so he didn't think Wraith needed to worry about it too much. Helga told them that they had arrived. Wraith asked where they were, and it looked like a training ground. Helga stated that he was going to test him here. Wraith was shocked once again. Seth tried to avoid eye contact with Wraith as he didn't inform him beforehand about this test. Noting that he wouldn't forget this, he waited for Helga's instructions. Helga told him that he was going to do golem construction. Golems were dolls with magic gem cores that could move by themselves using magical energy. He was puzzled as to why he was testing him for that, because usually you would go with potion making, weapon enhancement, or creating magical devices. He wondered what this old man was thinking. Helga told him that he didn't need him to make anything too large as long as it was able to move satisfactorily. He gave him a little magic gem to use. Wraith was nervous about this test because he had never made a golem before. At least he knew how to do it in theory, but he was still trembling and sweating. Helga stared at him and asked if he was going to do it or not. While walking to the training ground, Wraith was sure that he would probably fail on the spot if he told him that he had never made a golem before, so he decided to give it a try. He took a big breath and decided to focus. When making a golem, the most important things were eye detail and imagination. Envisioning the finished product was a basic process in alchemy, and it was an important process even more so when creating golems. The magical energy that would power it could be left to the magic gem, but if the body was not well made, its movements would be affected. At worst, the golem might go even berserks, which he wanted to avoid at all costs. He compressed the magic hem and started the process. Seth seemed nervous. While Wraith moved to the transformation step, Helga was shocked at how his work process was so beautiful. Within a second, Wraith created a wolf golem. Helga examined the golem. It looked so alive, and the level of finish was amazing. In all his decades of teaching alchemy, he had never seen a goal at this level before. As he wondered how many hundreds and thousands of times he must have practiced making something like this, Wraith said he hoped it wasn't too bad for something he was making for the first time. He saw Helga's frozen face and thought he made a mistake. Seth was shocked that he did something like this on his first try. Unfortunately, Helga didn't believe him. He said that even a genius who has worked all his life wouldn't be able to create what he just made here. A normal human wouldn't be able to reach this level even if they spent their whole life pursuing it, and he expected him to believe that he did this on his first try. Wraith was so nervous that he didn't know what to say and apologized. He asked how he made it on the test. Back in Helga's room, they sat in silence as Helga was in a gloomy mood. Wraith whispered as to what they were going to do. Seth blamed him for not knowing his own worth. Helga suddenly stated that he had no complaints. For now, he was going to go through the contents of the class. First, they were going to have golem construction for their first lesson. He then explained the process. He was going to explain the steps of golem construction, and then they would practice. And then they used the golems for their sword and magic practice. Helga said Wraith would help with the preparation for the training, as well as answering students' questions. He also had the duty to show them demonstrations, among other things. Wraith understood his work in here and asked if he could go home now, but Helga said he had something else. Since Wraith said it was his first time making a golem, he gave him something and said if he had any doubts, he should use that to practice until class time. It was the stone he was curious about earlier. He asked if that was a magic gem, and Helga responded that it was. Wraith thanked him for everything and excused himself. Helga watched them leave the academy from his room while questioning what he was doing by giving him something that didn't respond no matter how much he tried to process it. He forgot his age and let his emotions get the better of him. He seemed to hope that Wraith might be able to do something he really wanted. Wraith went home and wondered what kind of golem he should make with this magic gem he gave him. Sylvia was sure whatever he did would be wonderful. Wraith said he never gave him any directions on the shape or what materials he should use for the golem, so it was hard to choose. He asked what Lurims thought, and she said that if he was going to make one, he should make something cool. Even though she didn't say anything specific, Wraith was inspired and decided to do something to thrill the students. Laffy suggested making a golem that someone could practice swordplay or magic against. If he does that, then he won't forget to add things that could counter those. He seemed to agree with her. She suggested starting with deciding whether it should be humanoid or monster-like. With a big enthusiasm, Wraith thought of something, and now he had a goal. Feeling bad about this, Laffy asked what he was going to do. He said that he was going to make a golem that could transform. Even Lurims was a bit confused because she didn't know if that was possible. Not even she had made something like a transforming golem before, but if it was him, it might just be possible. He also said he had no idea. Lurims wanted to go back, but he didn't let her and mentioned she didn't even have anywhere to go back to. Laffy asked if he actually had a plan for how to do that. She knew his abilities, but even for him, it would be difficult to just whip up something that had never existed before. He said he had no idea, but he did have one. This was an experiment, so they were free to try out anything they liked. It needs to be made of a material durable enough to serve as a practice dummy, something that would transform easily and also allow magical energy to pass through it for it to move, so they were going to use mithril. He used it before when he was making Sylvia's stuff. If they were using mithril to make the golem, it makes it even more likely that they would need to make fine adjustments to it. He took out the magic gem and created a human golem in an instant. It was so detailed that they could mistake it for a real person. Laffy was really curious. Wraith asked Laffy to try to cut the golem but try not to break it. Laffy attacked with just one hand, but the golem stopped her blade. She attacked once again and cut it. Wraith then asked Sylvia to hit it with some light offensive magic. Sylvia made a normal attack on the golem and it surprisingly didn't harm the golem. She had been holding back, but a golem capable of withstanding the attacks of both Laffy and hers, who were S-ranked adventurers, would normally be unthinkable. Even if this was just for training, Sylvia was shocked at what Wraith made. Wraith then made some adjustments, and the golem changed its form by itself, which was even unbelievable for Lurims. After a moment, a human golem was successfully transformed into a wolf golem. Wraith seemed proud of his work and started chasing the golem while Sylvia and Lurimis were trying to figure him out. Lurimis asked if he had planned on bringing that golem to the academy. He asked if there was anything wrong with that, and Lurimis wasn't sure if he could bring that golem all the way to the academy. The golem's source of power was the magic gem inside it. If its magical energy runs out, the golem will stop functioning and won't start moving again until its energy is refilled. Suddenly, the wolf fell to the ground as it ran out of energy right away. He asked if Lurimis could refill its energy with her magic before they left for the academy. Lurims was fine with that, but it would still need to be resupplied every now and then, and she can't just go to the academy all the time. In other words, they would need to keep this guy in storage here. Wraith seemed a bit upset, so they tried to cheer him up, but he said that it was fine. He said he just needed to accept that his time with Liquid MK1 ended here. On Wraith's first day at the job, he found himself lost in the academy. While he was running around, Leisha noticed him and wondered who he was. Wraith had run all over the place but still couldn't find it, and the students were suspecting him now. While he was trying to figure out what to do, Leisha came and asked what he was doing there. He said that he was working here starting today. She knew that and asked where he was trying to go now. He said that he was trying to find Helga's workshop. He followed Leisha, and while walking he noticed that she and Seth looked alike. When he said that she had the same hair color, the position of their eyes and facial features matched too. She suddenly stared at him and asked what he thought of her brother. He said that he was a good friend who helped him out whenever he was in trouble. She found his answer very strange and then turned around. She was actually very happy because his brother was always surrounded by people who wanted to get close to him and use him. But Wraith was different. She took him to Helga's workshop and told him that she looked forward to their classes. After she left, Wraith knocked on the door and went inside. Helga was waiting for him in anger because he was late on his first day. He apologized and explained that he got lost on the way here. Helga then said their lessons start today and they wouldn't be having practical lessons yet, but it would make things easier to begin getting used to things already. He was going to be the one holding the class for the most part, so there was no need for him to push himself too hard. Wraith was dedicated to doing his best once the practical lessons started. Helga then asked how it went with the magic gem he passed on to him. He said that he used it for a golem, but it was an energy-efficient golem, so he couldn't really call it a success or a failure. Helga was shocked that he completed a golem with that magic gem. Recalling his failed tries, he couldn't believe what he had heard. He decided to think about that later and said he was going to introduce himself later. After that, they left the workshop to go to Wraith's first class of the day. When they entered the class, Wraith did his best to leave a good impact as the assistant teacher, but he couldn't help but feel nervous as the students were staring at him. He wanted to run away, but that was not an option, so he decided to listen to Helga speak and calm down, but it was no use. He couldn't catch what he was saying at all. When he finally heard him, Helga introduced him as their temporary teacher to the class. He glanced at Wraith to receive a reaction from him, but he was standing there trembling and sweating. Helga had to call out his name once again to remind him what to do. Wraith introduced himself and stated that he was going to do his best to pass on his knowledge to them while he was there. One of the students raised their hand and wanted to ask a question. She asked if he was the suspicious person from this morning. She saw him with Lisha, so she wondered what kind of relationship they had. Wraith nervously explained that the reason he was wandering around was to see his new students' faces and apologized. As for Lisha, he said that he was also an acquaintance of her. This caused the class to get even more confused, as he just said he was acquainted with one of the 4 great noble families. Helga decided to clear things up and revealed that he was just lost. He was sure his hesitant movements must have led them to believe that he was a suspicious person. He had had his share of dealing with his oddities. He wanted to put that aside and move on to the class. And so, from the very first day, he was stuck with an overly information-dense nickname of that temporary teacher who got lost in the school and was acquainted with one of the 4 great noble families. The class continued, and Helga was talking about the important part of making golem, which was the magic gem. He stated that it was the source of its power and the core of its activities, and if the magic gem was broken or ran out of energy, the golem would cease to function. Wraith was relieved that it didn't look like he had anything to do now. But all of this was stuff he was forced to learn through field experience by his mentor Lurims, and he was now seeing how it's normally taught. After explaining the golems, Helga decided to move to the training grounds and practice even though it was early. Wraith was excited because he could help with the practical lessons and make a comeback from his self-introduction. Helga informed the students that they could call Wraith if there was anything they didn't understand. But the students didn't seem to trust Wraith's abilities as he was the one who got lost on the school grounds. Wraith tried to calm down, comforting himself that their opinion of him should improve as long as he could answer their questions. He waited for them to come at him, but they all seemed capable enough to create golems, so he ended up standing there like a statue. He started panicking that their opinion wouldn't change, so he looked for any students that seemed to need help. He saw a girl who seemed a little confused, so he asked if she needed help, but she said she was fine. He continued to ask the other students, but they either refused him or said they would ask Helga. He realized that they were avoiding him. Lisha and Wraith found themselves sighing at the same time. Wraith asked what was wrong, and she said that she had been getting battered with questions about her relationship with him. Wraith felt bad and apologized. Lasai said it wasn't his fault and he shouldn't let it bother him. On the other hand, Wraith mentioned how he was being avoided and didn't know what to do. Lisha said they couldn't do anything about him being seen as a suspicious person and asked why his ability was being called into question. Wraith responded that he hadn't actually shown them any of what he could do. Lisha told him to come over to where she was in the next practical lesson. Wraith wondered the reason, but she excused herself. He continued to wonder what she was thinking of until the end of the lesson. After class, he went to Daisy's shop. She thought he was too busy to come here around this time. Wraith explained that he had a bit of time, so he thought he would pop by. She asked if it was okay for him to leave his shop, but he had Lotia looking after the shop. Daisy then asked what he messed up this time. Wraith seemed annoyed that she assumed he messed something up. He wanted her to stop saying things that made his head hurt. Daisy asked if he mass-produced a bunch of elixirs. He said that he recently became a temporary teacher at the Magic Academy, and word got out to the students that he got lost in the school and was late on his first day. Daisy's first reaction was to ask him if he was an idiot. Wraith begged for help, asking what he could do to restore his honor, but Daisy was confused as to why he would ask her. He said that if he went to Lurims, she would definitely hold it over his head, but Daisy would give her honest opinion on the spot. She said that if he wanted to come back from that, he would just have to show them what he could do as an alchemist. He realized that he would just have to bear it until the next practical lesson. He then asked how she was doing lately. He hasn't been able to help her here or teach her alchemy lately, so he was wondering. She asked if he would like to see it since it would be faster. They went to the room and Daisy was using Lamu. When they first met, Daisy made a medium-quality potion from Lamu, so Wraith wondered how much she had improved since then. When she started making the potion, Wraith immediately noticed that her movements were a lot more natural than before, and he could tell she put a lot of effort into improving. When she finished, Wraith checked the quality of the potion, and the result was incredible. She managed to make a high-quality potion. He said that she was really busy running this shop by herself, so for her to improve her technique like this in less than a year was amazing. Daisy's cheeks got red and she said she might even catch up to him someday. Wraith was looking forward to that day. Back in his shop, Wraith saw Lurims sitting with an ominous look on her face. When he asked, she said that she felt like the flow of her mana had been off. He asked if something happened and she responded that she didn't feel like there were any negative side effects right now, but it felt as if she had a small bone stuck in her throat. That sounded pretty uncomfortable, so he asked if there was any way for her to investigate it. It was at the level where a normal mage wouldn't even notice, so it would be pretty difficult to investigate it. Wraith assumed that if there were no negative side effects, then they could ignore it for now. Lurims agreed and then asked how school was today. Wraith's facial expression was actually enough to know how it was. Laffy and Sylvia came and they were pretty shocked to see him all depressed like that. Loreems explained that she just asked him about the school, and he became like this. Laffy asked if something happened and he said that the students were avoiding him. She asked for more details and he said that a bunch of stuff happened and now they didn't trust him. He didn't even understand what exactly he did wrong. He suddenly decided to quit the job. He was just an assistant anyway, and at worst, all he would have to do was just support Helga. He realized that this was a ridiculous thing to do, so he just said he would have to go with the flow. Sylvia said he would be fine. She then mentioned that the flow of his mana had been weird lately. Wraith said it didn't seem to be doing any harm, so it was okay to not pat it any mind. He asked Laffy how things had been with her, and she said that thanks to him, Ariel's been a lot more docile and things were pretty peaceful now. He was glad to hear that. Laffy reminded him to not hesitate to ask if he needed help with anything. He thanked them and said he would rely on them a lot when that time came. After that, they decided to have dinner. On the second day of practical lessons, Wraith was still being ignored by the students, but he couldn't help but notice that all the students were really creative with their golems. He wondered if they just had different sensibilities from him. For now, he decided to head over to where Lisha was. He found her staring at the magic gems in her hand. He asked what was wrong because the other students were already making their golems and he thought she was slacking off. She told him that she wasn't slacking off. She said that they needed to show everyone what he was capable of while handing off a magic gem to him. She inhaled and announced very loudly that Wraith was going to show them a demonstration. The students seemed curious to see what was going to happen. They were all very judgmental towards Wraith's abilities. Wraith knew this was his chance to turn things around and told her to leave it to him. He requested she stay back a bit as he was going to use that area. While he was hearing the judgmental comments about him, he created a beautiful cat golem in less than a few seconds, leaving everyone in shock. The golem was practically the real thing, and that fur texture was just like that of a living creature. They started to wonder if that teacher was always this capable. Lisha was among those students who were shocked. She heard it from her brother about lots of abnormal genius things about Wraith, but she had never expected that it would be to this extent. The golem he created was so real that you can't even call that making a doll anymore. It was like creating life itself. For context, golems were not expected to be able to move much. That may be fine if you just need them to be durable, but not everyone can create the intricate bodies needed for a golem to move. If there was even the smallest defect in the golem's body, the golem would break apart when they made any forceful movement. In other words, the golem that Wraith just created was something that lies far beyond the common sense of any normal alchemist. But he didn't seem to get the reaction he was expecting, as he thought he made a pretty good one. He asked Lisha if that was okay, and she said that she might have underestimated him a bit. She finally knows how her brother feels. Wraith was confused, so she repeated what she said, but he was still puzzled, which made her even more surprised. Wraith wasn't thinking anything of what he just did, and that made her pity her brother even more. In the next scene, a student approached Wraith with a question. Her face was flushed and red, which confused Wraith. The student stuttered for a bit before explaining that she had made the body for her golem, but it had broken, and she didn't know what to do. Relieved that it was just a class-related issue, Wraith told her that the problem might be that she wasn't focusing enough on compression. He advised her to put more effort into that aspect when creating her golem. The student gave it a shot and managed to make a golem without breaking it. It had been like this ever since he made that golem for Licia. The students had been asking questions non-stop, but being called sensei was a bit embarrassing for him. Helga called for him and informed him that they were going to get into the main part of the lesson, making golems for practice dummies, and asked if he could show them a demonstration. He could just use that time he did it with Laffy and Sylvia for reference, so he just has to make a normal humanoid one that doesn't transform. He put the magic gem and created a detailed humanoid with ease. The student's shock every time he made a golem hasn't changed. Helga told Lisha to try to attack that golem using her magic. Lisha used her wind magic and attacked the golem. However, there wasn't even a scratch on it after the attack. The students were shocked that there wasn't even a little damage on the golem. Lisha was the strongest out of all of them in magic, but that golem took it like it was nothing. Her magic was lost to a dirt golem, which was the first time it happened. Lisha seemed annoyed and she started staring at Wraith. She asked what was wrong with that golem. Puzzled, Wraith said he just made a normal golem. She started scolding him in front of everyone. While she was scolding him, the students started to worry that Helga would want them to make something like that. Helga heard them and reassured them that he didn't expect them to make something of that level. 1 week later, Wraith was confused as to why those students were blasting away at the golems they made with magic. The training ground looked like a war zone now. He decided to move out of the way so he doesn't get caught in the crossfire, but he noticed that they break surprisingly easily. They were made of dirt now, but he thought they would be using metals during the test or mithril. He wondered if they could even get enough mithril for all the students. Suddenly, Wills came. Wraith was shocked seeing him there like that, so his reaction wasn't really friendly. He asked him what he was doing here, and Wills reminded him that he was the chairman of this school. He explained that he just thought he would see how his new employee was faring, and asked how he was. He said that it had been kind of bumpy. Wills thought he would be doing swimmingly. Wraith nervously laughed and said there had been some difficulties, but he was doing his best to earn his pay. Wills was glad to hear that. He suddenly stared at his face but didn't tell him the reason. Leisha called for Wraith, so he had to excuse himself. When he went to Leisha, she said that he just looked really uncomfortable when he was talking to Wills. Wraith didn't realize that he was acting like that, but Leisha explained to him that he was acting completely normal on the surface, but she could easily tell that he didn't want to be there. That sounded scary to Wraith. Leisha explained that as a member of the 4 great noble families, she had been to a lot of places, and it was a skill you picked up even if you didn't want to. Wraith was surprised because Seth didn't have anything like that. He then wondered if Wills could tell too. She didn't think there was any way he wouldn't have noticed. Wraith decided to not hide it if he already knew about it. Leisha realized that it was true that Wills and Wraith knew each other. Wraith responded that it wasn't like he wanted to know him and it was pure coincidence, but she didn't think that he was the kind of person you met by chance. Wraith then thanked her. She figured that it was for the time she asked for a demonstration. Thanks to that, Wraith managed to turn things around with the students. She said that it was something she needed to do, so she was grateful. Now things should go smoothly, as long as nothing happens. Wraith was hoping nothing happened too. The next day, Wraith found himself in front of the chairman's office. He gathered his confidence and entered the room. Wills was waiting for him. He figured that Wraith was wondering why he had called him here. He explained that there was no need to be so tense and that he just wanted to ask a favor. He wanted him to help to maintain the school property. Wraith wanted an explanation, so he said that it was exactly how it sounded. For example, the training grounds were in quite bad shape now because of the recent alchemy practical lessons. He was right, the grounds were pretty beat up after the lesson yesterday, but he only came here to be an assistant teacher for alchemy classes, so he didn't have to do extra work on top of that. Right when he was about to turn him down, Wills told him that he would be compensated, so he accepted to do it. Wills commented on how quick he was, and he explained that it was all to create a conducive learning environment for the students. He would do all that he could to earn more money and take whatever extra payment he could get. And so his days went on with him maintaining the school's facilities bit by bit. But recently, students had a lot of questions and requests from him. Since the last test would be held during the next practical lesson, the questions from the students had been relentless. Wraith decided to hold an after-school test measure today to help the students. He put up the notice, but since it was on such short notice, he didn't expect many students. But to his surprise, the class was filled with students. He was pretty impressed, and since he had just been supporting Helga's lessons, he hadn't actually held any lessons of his own, so he was pretty nervous. He told the students to take one of those boxes each and he would explain what they would be doing next. After everyone received their boxes, he told them to shape the dirt inside the box into a ball. They started to wonder if that was all because it was pretty easy. One of them thought he might get them individually once they do that, but he said that was all for today. They seemed super confident about this and were sure they would finish it in a snap, but when they tried to do it, it was a failure. The dirt wasn't moving at all. Wraith said he was sure they had noticed by now that it wasn't just a speck of regular dirt. That was the dirt from the southern part of the continent, which had been depleted of magical energy. As far as soil goes, there were many places in the world where magical energy accumulated easily. Conversely, some places repel magical energy. That was the kind of soul Wraith had prepared. He told them that it was okay if they wanted to give up. He would also be answering their questions while he was here, so could just raise their hands. There were lots of questions. Leisha stated that it wasn't moving a single bit and wondered if it could really move. He acknowledged that they had their doubts, so he decided to do a demonstration and told them to gather around. He quickly made a ball using the dirt, and then Leisha wondered if there was any trick to doing it. He said that they could just always force more magic into it and could also do it by being extremely meticulous. As long as the dirt repels magic to some extent, it wouldn't move as they want it to, unless they force more magical power into it like he mentioned earlier. So he suggested paying attention to every individual particle of dirt. If it was repelling their magic, and they couldn't control it like they normally do, then they just need to be precise enough to overcome that. This practice was to train their own strength. It wasn't about application or anything like that, and only those who master the basics of alchemy could succeed. Leisha focused and finally managed to move the dirt a bit, but keeping this up was really hard for her, and she didn't even think this was the kind of thing they could do in a day. At the very least, she didn't think they could make any shapes out of this. He wondered if he set the bar too high, and Leisha confirmed him. Wraith decided that it might be better to break it down into smaller steps and told them that they were going to change the objective to just making the dirt move. The special lesson had finally finished and everyone was really hardworking. It had gotten pretty late, but he still had to maintain the school's facilities. He suddenly noticed a paw print on the training ground. He wondered if it was made during a different lesson, and if there were other marks here too. He decided to follow the marks. In the next scene, Wraith comes back from a hard day at work and is greeted by Laffy, Lurimes, and Sylvia. The dinner was ready and they were all waiting for him. He thanked them for the dinner and started eating. Laffy asked what happened at the school, and he responded that things were fine now and there was a test coming up, so he stayed back to answer the students' questions. Laffy, with a flirty manner, commented that he was a good teacher. He was embarrassed, so he couldn't answer back. Lurimes continued to tease him by calling him sensei. As they started to yell at each other, Sylvia mentioned that the weird feeling she had with the magic flow was gone now. Lurimes stopped and said it just vanished all of a sudden. Wraith asked if they figured out the cause, but unfortunately they couldn't. Laffy changed the subject and asked what happened during that test he mentioned earlier. He explained that they were doing a golem construction test, but he wasn't really involved in it. He was just a temporary teacher, so he wouldn't be evaluating them during the test. But instead, he was going to do whatever he could to help them study for it. Seeing his dedication, Lurimes teased him once again. Wraith dodged her comments and mentioned that he had also started maintaining the school's facilities. As long as he was doing well, Laffy was happy for him and she was sure he would do great. The day of the test arrived and Wraith was glad that it was a great day to have a test. Every student was in the training ground and they all seemed tense. After confirming everyone was here, Helga began the examination. The key to this test was making a sturdy golem in a short amount of time. Marks were deducted if you took too long, and right now the fastest students could make their golems in 5 minutes. After that, they go straight into the durability test. Helga would cast some light magic on it and see how well the golem retains its shape. When it was finally Leisha's turn, Wraith watched her very carefully. She created a good-looking golem and then Helga tested its durability. 3 minutes for golem construction and no issues with its durability was impressive in Helga's expectations. After thanking Helga, Leisha went to Wraith and asked how she did it. Wraith was confused, so she repeated her question. She was wondering how she did it on the test. He said that she seemed to do the best out of all the students. That somehow didn't feel like a compliment when it was coming from him. Wraith said that he was trying to praise her. Suddenly, Leisha felt something weird about the flow of magic, just like Sylvia and Lurimes. She said that she didn't feel anything like this yesterday. Wraith couldn't tell the cause of this and wondered if it was an irregularity in the flow of magic. He tried to comfort her that it was probably nothing. He didn't think it was just a coincidence since he had been hearing too much of it. After school, he continued to repair the training ground and saw the paw prints again. He decided to investigate a little. He followed the paw prints until it ended, but it suddenly stopped, and he couldn't learn anything about the flow of magic or the mystery of these paw prints. The next day, Helga was boiling in anger after seeing the culmination of the students' efforts. They were all destroyed. The students put their heart and soul into every golem here, so Helga was so angry. Wraith suggested reporting this to Wells immediately. They went to his office and Wills informed them that there weren't any witnesses. The security guard saw no suspicious figures at night and there were no other reports beyond that. Regardless, he wanted him to let them investigate the broken golems as they might be able to glean something from them. They went to see the golems and Wills thought they were destroyed with magic. He couldn't say for sure, but he doubted that human hands could inflict this sort of damage. He then noticed that the magical energy in the gem was gone. Normally, magic gems shouldn't reach this state on their own. The culprit must have used up its magical power to its limit. For now, he decided to increase the number of security guards. Lessons were about to begin, so they had to leave the rest of the investigation for later. After that day, Wraith told Lurimes what happened at the school. He said that he wasn't that knowledgeable about magic, so he wouldn't know, but he wondered if there was actually anything that would warrant gathering so much magical energy. She responded that she didn't think there were many cases where you would extract the magical energy right out of magic gems. In the end, if you don't already have somewhere to store that magical energy, you would have to use it on the spot. She asked if there were any traces of anything like that, but he didn't think so. In this case, Lurimes didn't have a clue either. Wraith realized that the situation was troubling because not even Lurimes, who was well-versed in magic, didn't know about it. Since this has to do with golems, he thought looking at a golem might give him a hint. So he decided to take a look at the golem he made before. He went to the storage room to see the golem, but was shocked when he saw what was inside. In the next scene, Wraith is called Lotia and Lurimes. He said that this was important and that they must listen carefully. He did hold himself until that moment, and he started freaking out while informing them that his liquid MK1 was gone. Lotia was confused, so Lurimes explained that it was the golem Wraith created. Lotia then asked why it was gone and if it moved by itself. That was what Wraith wanted to know. It didn't even have magic in it, so it was weird. He then recalled the moment when people around him told him that they had a weird feeling about the magic flow. He asked Lurimes when the flow of magic here returned to normal, and she responded that it was yesterday. He then asked when the irregularity began. Lurim seemed to figure out what he was trying to say. Wraith explained that the irregularity in the flow of magic began right after he made liquid MK1, and then the same thing had actually been happening at the Magic Academy since yesterday. The source of that disturbance in the flow of magic was likely to be his liquid MK1, and now it somehow made its escape to the Magic Academy. Looking at the golem destruction incident at the Magic Academy, the culprit took all the magical energy from the magic gems of the broken golems. If that was the work of an energy-inefficient golem hungry for magical energy for its consumption, that would mean he was responsible for this. He decided to call Laffy and the rest to help. He summarized everything to the girls and wanted their help to stop that golem. Sylvia thought this was a disaster. Laffy mentioned that it was going to be a real pain to deal with a golem made by Wraith. Lotia just wanted to stay home and sleep. Wraith was counting on all of them and was really sorry about this. Laffy didn't really blame him because no one had ever heard of a golem moving about on its own anyway. Wraith hoped that no one would know who made the golem if they didn't report it, but Laffy responded that it would be obvious based on its abilities alone. Come to think of it, regardless of whether or not they use it, this might just come in handy. Laffy told him that they were leaving, and Wraith took a book with him and joined the rest of the group to catch the golem that he created. When they arrived at the academy, they realized that the tighter security ended up working against them. Wraith thought about a way to sneak past them. He then came up with an idea and told Lurimes that he had a favor to ask. 10 minutes later, everyone was changing their clothes to the academy uniform. Wraith explained that it was just for getting past the main gate. Now they looked just like regular students here, so he thought there wouldn't be a problem. The security guard asked them what they were doing there, and Wraith explained that he left something behind. The man was suspicious that all of them came back just for one student's stuff. He thought they might need those materials from the school and they might be able to get by with magic disguises using the uniforms here as references, but he wasn't sure about it now after seeing the guard's reaction. To his luck, the soldier let them in without any trouble. When they went inside the school, Lurims commented on how bold his plan was. Wraith mentioned that he was actually impressed she got through like that as she was in her late 20s. Laffy asked what their plan was now. He said that they were going to go where the broken golems were and they might find some leads there. There were still guards in front of the room where golems were kept. Laffy wondered if the school had already identified the culprit, and Lotia suggested going home before they got caught. Wraith insisted they look around a little more and asked Lurimes if she could locate golems using her magic. She had been trying ever since they entered the school, but she hasn't sensed anything. But at that moment, she suddenly felt a weird magic. They decided to check it out and went to the backyard, but they couldn't see any golems. That was strange because Sylvia was sure she felt magical energy from there. Lurimes said it was still close. Wraith wondered if it escaped, but Lurimes and Sylvia were sure that it was still close. But the strange thing was that this golem's magical energy was constantly on the move. If it was moving constantly, it should already have been found either by them or by the security guards. Wraith suddenly realized that the guard they were looking for was the golem. He grabbed his shoulder and told him not to give himself new functions when he wasn't looking. The man turned to him and suddenly started melting. While they were shocked, it transformed into its real form and it was confirmed that this golem was liquid MK1. Laffy and the others were confused, but even Wraith didn't know. He said that it might be because of the magic it was absorbed or something else entirely, but at some point it was giving itself new abilities. While they were questioning how that was possible, liquid MK1 started running away. Laffy immediately chased it and slashed its throat, but she failed. Wraith told Lurimes, Lotia, and Sylvia to use their magic, as it seemed hard to defeat this thing. But unfortunately, the golem was not affected by the magic either. Wraith asked Lurimes to enclose the golem's surroundings to make sure it couldn't escape. While Lurimes was capturing the golem, Laffy helped her to make sure it didn't escape. After that, Wraith asked Laffy to attack it again with her sword. He said that it was fine if it didn't hit. There was something he wanted to confirm. When Laffy made an attack, the golem was once again able to escape from her sword. Wraith figured that they couldn't hit this thing, but it just nullified the magic attacks Lurimes and the others threw at it, so he had no choice but to let Laffy do all the work. He thought it was strange, but if it was that agile, he wondered why it would need to bother transforming into a human form. If his predictions were right, then soon enough Laffy would be able to hit it. He was right, Laffy hit the golem. Normally, a golem can't move without magical energy, as he thought liquid MK1 was starting to run out of magical energy. That's why it went after the magic gems and the golems made by the students. But now, there weren't any magic-filled gems like that nearby for it to replenish its energy. Its gradually slowing movements were proof of that. Now it was even getting hit by Laffy's attacks. Wraith believed that they could do this. As long as it was a golem, it wouldn't be able to move without magical energy, So if they keep fighting it like this and draining its magical energy, then he believed that they would defeat it eventually. But suddenly, the golem transformed into an armored soldier and talked to them. Wraith was shocked by this golem's capabilities. Laffy said if it could talk, they might convince it to stop, but it talked again, saying that it was no use. Wraith noticed that at this rate, Laffy might be defeated before it runs out of mana. He told Laffy to return here for now and called for Lurims too. In the meantime, he told Lotia and Sylvia to keep it occupied by using physical spells as much as they could. Laffy came and asked if he had come up with something. Wraith didn't know if it would work, but he had thought of a good plan. He explained his plan and they decided to follow that. Laffy joined Sylvia and Lotia first. Laffy was going to fight the golem and keep it occupied, and then Lurims would look for openings and attack the golem with magic balls of ice. It would surely do the same thing as it did earlier and nullify that magic. And when that happened, Wraith emerged from inside the ball. Using his transform ability, he tried to finish its job, but then the magic gem started to glow. An explosion happened and they were all on the ground in a second. This time, the golem was even bigger. Lurims figured out why the flow of mana felt weird before. It was because this golem was sucking in magical energy from its surroundings. When Wraith asked what that meant, she explained that it might be capable of refilling its magical energy on its own. Wraith started to panic because that was his only plan. Lurims doubted that it was able to absorb enough mana for all its functions. That's why it had to go after the golems the students made. They either have to wait until it runs out of mana or do something about its magic gem. Wraith started shaking even though he wasn't the one who was fighting with it. Laffy once again rushed to the golem and attacked. The battle was a tough one, but since it's gotten bigger, it was also slower too. Laffy asked what they were going to do. Her hands were full just keeping it distracted and she would need help to destroy its magic gem. It had become a lot easier to hit it now that it was bigger, but they would need to do something about its durability. Lurims told everyone to get out of the way because she was about to fire off a big one now. Wraith was confused because that would also damage the school, but Lurims didn't see any problem as long as they fixed it after. He was against this idea too, but Lurims put him inside a magic ball and told him to be a good boy. She had been holding back all this time so that they wouldn't get caught, but she was beyond caring at this point. After her huge attack on the golem, Laffy and Wraith hoped that it was destroyed. That golem couldn't have withstood a blast like that, and there might not even be any trace of it left. But when the smoke disappeared, they saw the golem with one broken arm. That was Lurims' full power, so Wraith ran out of ideas. Laffy didn't think her sword would have any effect on it now. At this point, he thought their only option was for him to touch it directly and stop its magic gem that way. He didn't see any other way and he thought they could do it if they all worked together, but putting everyone in even more danger was something that Wraith didn't want. But the girls were already ready for him and he saw their dedication. He gathered his confidence and told them to stop its movement so that he could get close to it. Lotia, Sylvia, Laffy, and Lurims attacked one by one and created an opening for Riot. He managed to touch its magic gem and then started to halt the magic gem's functions. But it was hard to do that because the golem was resisting by absorbing his mana. Wraith got angry as the owner of this golem and pushed more and more. Eventually he succeeded, and the golem crashed to the ground. Wraith couldn't stand straight as it absorbed so much mana of him. They were all relieved now that it was over, but the real problem began when Wills and the guards came. The next day, Wraith found himself in Helga's room, and Helga was apologizing to him. He tried to stop him and raise his head, but Helga didn't listen. In the following investigation, the cause of the golem's rampage was found to be the magic gem that Helga had passed to Wraith. If he had given it to Wraith in ignorance, then nothing could have been done about it, and it could have been written off as an unfortunate accident. However, Helga had knowingly given him a magic gem he knew to be defective. Apparently, he had imagined that Wraith would be unable to make a golem from it and would become depressed. However, Wraith was somehow able to create a golem from that defective magic gem. Therefore, this entire situation was brought about by a combination of Helga's envious attempt to harass Wraith and Wraith's own abnormal alchemic ability. Helga mentioned that it would be kind of rough for him if he had to compensate the school for the damage as well. He couldn't possibly trouble him any further and promised to do something about that. Wraith then excused himself and then went to Will's office. Wills asked how it went, and he said that he was really apologetic. He was a good man after all, but of course, Wills wouldn't make him shoulder any of the responsibility for this incident, so he didn't have to worry about that. But he commented on how shocking his abilities as an alchemist were. Wills then asked him if he was okay to continue here as a teacher. Wraith immediately thought about his friends and his life outside the work and politely refused his offer. Wills wasn't surprised, but he didn't forget to remind him that the door was always open. After that, Lurims and Wraith started swiping the mess they created. She asked how it turned out, and he said that there was some kind of problem with the golem's magic gem and they didn't blame him for the incident. He also said that he quit teaching. Lurims seemed surprised, so he asked if she thought he was suited to being a teacher. Lurims said that he didn't have many friends, so he wouldn't be able to help the students with their problems. Wraith said it was fine and he had Laffy and the rest now too. Lurims was really glad that he was able to meet nice people in the capital. When Wraith asked what that was about, she said that it was time for her to leave now. First, he didn't understand what she meant and asked where she was going. She then told him that she was going somewhere other than the capital. Wraith was annoyed that she always said those kinds of things so suddenly, but that was who she was. She started teasing him by asking if he was going to miss her. She stopped the jokes and explained that she got to see her little disciple all grown up now, so she thought she should go back to traveling again soon. Wraith wanted to throw a farewell party at least. This made her pretty happy and she started teasing him once again. 2 weeks passed since the golem's rampage and it was time for Lurim's goodbye party. Wraith prepared lots of beautiful food and created a great atmosphere for her. Lurims poured a glass of champagne and everyone cheered for the end of Wraith's teaching activities and the start of Lurimi's new journey. They spend the party laughing, eating lots of good food, drinking, and having fun. 2 months later, we see Wraith waking up the girls and opening his shop for another beautiful day. That is the complete end of the manga recap. Thanks for listening and watching along.